249 years ago, a massive dimensional rift tore open the heavens. From it descended beings that would later be known as demons. Upon crossing over, they declared war on mankind, marking the catastrophic beginning of the demonic invasion. Realizing the gravity of the threat, the Orthodox Alliance formed the Orthodox Heavenly Demon Extermination Corps, vowing to subjugate the invaders. Just 3 days later, they clashed with the demonic host in Anhwa and were completely annihilated. Within a year, half the population of the Central Plains had been slaughtered. The Orthodox and unorthodox factions of the Murim united to form a final line of defense in Sichuan. The bloody siege lasted for 2 weeks, wiping out 90% of the coalition forces and effectively bringing an end to the Murim of the Central Plains. The few remaining survivors were enslaved and dragged away to the demon realm. He was among those captured and dragged into that living hell. 5 years later, because he had been born completely unable to harness internal energy, he was classified as a rare specimen for biological experimentation. Through brutal testing and relentless brainwashing, he was eventually forced into the frontline subjugation army of the demon realm. Decades flew by after that. He invaded other dimensions and orchestrated massacres, slaughtering countless lives until he grew numb to the violence. 75 years after becoming a slave soldier, his ruthless achievements earned him recognition, elevating him to a commander within the demon army. Then, 120 years after his promotion, he finally discovered something. He spent 50 years searching for the precise conditions and methods to manifest it, and another 65 years meticulously planning his insurrection. Now, 1 week after his rebellion ignited, we find our exhausted, battle-worn protagonist facing a towering demonic entity. The rebellion had failed. It was a crushing disappointment, throwing away centuries of hard-earned merit for a revolt that fell short. Standing before him was the demon king, Tarant. The Dark Lord mockingly addressed him as Eschwitz von Glenthal, but he despised that absurd title. His true name was Sabagan, though the Demon King failed to understand why a slave cared about a human name. "I have watched humans like you all this time," Tarant mused. "Though your raw talent and skills are utterly insignificant, you possessed a tenacious, desperate obsession with survival, no matter the odds. That was your only real strength. So why throw your life away so recklessly after all this time?" Sabagan looked up and answered him. He needed to experience the Dark Lord's full power firsthand just once to secure a definitive victory the next time they clashed. He had no choice but to test his limits today. To the Demon King, this sounded mildly amusing, yet profoundly idiotic. If the rebel thought he would be granted mercy, he was mistaken. His fate was sealed and he would die here today. But with his pride fully intact, Sabagan refused to perish by the Dark Lord's hand. Driving his palm into his own chest, he crushed his heart, triggering a sudden blinding bolt of purple lightning that crashed down upon him. The Demon King stared in utter disbelief. It was the authority of Nenazirum, an ancient god. The reason Sabagan had endured centuries of defeat and humiliation in silent compliance was entirely for this moment. Our protagonist smiled through the pain. "Just you wait, you arrogant monster. Next time I will prepare so thoroughly that I'll tear you apart myself. Every single one of your wretched demons will rot." Instead of raging, the Demon King laughed, genuinely anticipating the challenge from the only human he had ever respected. The scene shifts instantly back to the Central Plains of the Murim. A sudden bolt of purple lightning struck a secluded temple, marking exactly 10 years before the demonic invasion would begin. The setting changes to the Dragon Spring Academy, the prestigious martial arts training grounds of the Orthodox Alliance, where laborers were busy repairing a massive crater left by the previous night's bizarre storm. "I can't believe a random lightning bolt could deal this much damage," a laborer muttered. "Still, we should be glad the only one caught in the blast was that loser. You know, the orphan assistant instructor Dr. Jin Baek took in. They say he took a direct hit from the lightning a few days ago." Imagine a martial arts instructor who can't even harness internal energy. Word is he survived without a scratch, but it honestly would have been a mercy if he died right there. Today, his public humiliation is practically guaranteed. The crowd gathers around the Academy's dueling arena. The official challenge for the position of Assistant Lance Instructor at the Dragon Spring Academy is about to begin. The referee announced to an eager crowd. In one corner stood the incumbent assistant instructor, Sabagan, and in the other stood his formidable challenger, a martial artist highly recommended for the position, the master of the invincible divine spear, Sun Deok. A formal request was submitted to re-evaluate assistant instructor Sabagan's credentials. This duel will determine who truly deserves the title. Both combatants must fight with the full honor of the martial path. Sun Deok looked at his opponent with smirking confidence. Sabagan was sturdier than expected, considering the rumors that he had just been struck by lightning. Sun Deok figured the whole lightning story was just a pathetic excuse to back out of the fight, As a master of the brutal demon bull spear art, Sun Deok planned to wrap this up quickly out of pity, giving the weakling a chance to surrender and save face. However, our protagonist remained completely unbothered. In his past life, there was an assistant instructor at this very academy who couldn't wield a single drop of internal energy. Born with crippled meridians, he was a natural target for relentless mockery and disdain. Ultimately, that incompetent man, labeled the eternal shame of the institution, suffered a devastating defeat in a public duel, lost his job, and was reduced to a miserable errand boy enduring daily torment. Sabigan smiled subtly, recalling those wretched days. Sun Deok scoffed. I have no idea what nonsense you're muttering, but if you've been looking forward to this beating, then stop wasting time and step up, you fool! Infuriated by Sabigan's nonchalant demeanor, Sun Deok swore to shatter his unearned confidence. He originally intended to go easy on him out of respect for his rank, but it was time to shut that arrogant mouth. Channeling his demon bull spear art, Sun Deok lunged forward with his first stance, fierce bull charge, thrusting his spear with explosive force. Yet, when the spearhead should have pierced flesh, Sun Deok felt absolutely nothing. His weapon struck empty air. Sabigan casually slipped past the blade. The form was decent, Sabigan remarked coolly, but you lack precision, panicking. Sun Deok spun around and launched a rapid follow-up strike, but Sabigan effortlessly evaded it without breaking a sweat. How could a supposedly talentless weakling evade a specialized spear art refined over decades so easily? The intelligence reports were completely wrong. Seizing the moment, Sabigan added insult to injury. Who taught you such sloppy fundamentals? It's embarrassing. Overwhelmed with rage at being mocked by a fraud, Sun Deok's blood boiled. Refusing to accept reality, the frustrated challenger put everything into his fourth stance, falling bull strike. Unfazed, Sabigan stood his ground, letting him close the distance. But as Sun Deok leapt to deliver the crushing blow, Sabigan quietly manifested a spell. Before the martial artist could even comprehend what a fireball was, the concentrated magic erupted mid-air, blasting him backward. The entire arena gasped in utter shock as Sun Deok crashed into the dirt, his robes singed and smoking. The match is over, the referee yelled. The victor is Assistant Instructor Sabigan, having survived centuries in the brutal demon realm after his past capture. Sabigan had mastered an entirely different power system. High-level magic. In my book, this particular martial art is called a fireball, Sabigan thought, looking down at his scorched opponent. And it is indisputably more efficient than anything the Marim has to offer. He turned away as the medical team rushed in. The spectators murmured in confusion, unable to comprehend what kind of technique could conjure pure fire out of thin air. The Academy elders in the viewing booth were equally baffled by the unorthodox display, but they had no choice but to recognize the result. Congratulations on your victory, Instructor Sabigan, one elder said stiffly. Though it was widely known you lacked internal energy, surely that explosive phenomenon was merely a bizarre stroke of luck. Sabigan shrugged. I just happened to eat a strange glowing herb I found while taking a stroll, and suddenly my meridians cleared right up. Turns out I have quite a lot of energy now. The elder's face turned red with anger. Are you mocking us? How dare you spouting such utter nonsense to your superiors? You are insulting our intelligence. Whether you believe me or not is entirely up to you, Sabigan replied smoothly, completely unbothered. And as for cheating, this was a challenge for a lance instructor position, yes, but there was never a rule forbidding other techniques. I won this match fairly according to Academy regulations, so why am I being interrogated? A senior elder cut in, telling his colleague to calm down since Sabigan technically spoke the truth. Before they could dismiss him, Sabigan interrupted them. Since the leadership is gathered, I have a formal request. I am officially applying for the examination to be promoted to a full senior instructor. Leaving the stunned elders behind, he turned and exited the arena. Whispers followed him out. The Dragon Spring Academy was one of the premier martial institutions established by the Orthodox Alliance to ensure the standard of the Marim did not decline. Its sole purpose was to forge elite young martial artists into the foundational pillars of the Orthodox Alliance's future. Enrolling promising teenagers between the ages of 15 and 18 from various prominent sects and noble clans, the faculty consisted of esteemed masters recognized across the land. The hierarchy was strictly split between junior assistant instructors and senior master instructors. Assistant instructors were typically treated more like glorified servants than actual teachers. Seeking a quiet place, Sabigan arrived at the Body Recovery Pavilion, where an old friend was waiting. How on earth are you suddenly channeling internal energy? What did you do to yourself? Asked Dr. Jin Baek, the resident physician. Jin Baek wasn't a combat instructor, but a kind-hearted doctor who tended to the wounded and sick. I already told you, it was just a miracle, Sabigan replied softly. Don't give me that nonsense. Jinbei snapped, his eyes tearing up. I've been treating you since you were a child. I tried every medicine, searched every text to fix your blocked meridians. If it were that simple, then I have utterly failed you as a doctor. The old man wept, overwhelmed with guilt for the years Sabigan spent enduring societal scorn. Sabigan looked at him warmly. This man had always been a father figure to him. In his relative timeline, it had been over 5 centuries since they last spoke, but the regression brought him back to this exact moment. 15 years ago, Jinbei was the one who had charged through a burning village to rescue Sabigan from a brutal bandit raid. In the original timeline, this kind doctor eventually lost his life trying to save others during a crisis. This time, however, Sabigan swore he would use his power to protect the physician from that tragic fate. Calm down, father. You have nothing to blame yourself for, Sabigan said gently. Trust me from now on. I will handle everything. Later that night, in the privacy of his quarters, Sabigan focused on his internal core. The temporal regression had stripped away over 90% of his absolute mana, capping his current output at the 4th circle. Reaching it would require serious effort. It was a massive downgrade considering he had achieved the 8th circle in the demon realm, but he was grateful to have any mana at all. He had escaped that hell, successfully resetting the timeline of the Murim. The demonic invasion had not happened yet, but yet was the critical word. In exactly 10 years, the spatial rifts would reopen, and the Murim would face extinction once more. But this loop would be different. Sabigan retained 3 centuries of memories, vital intelligence on the demon army's tactics, their specific magic vulnerabilities, the locations of their hidden vanguard supply caches, and most importantly, how to permanently execute the demon king Tyrant. His strategic musings were cut short when Jinbei knocked on his door. The deputy director of the academy, Sung-yoon, was demanding his presence immediately. Despite the late hour, a formal summons had been issued. Jinbei looked deeply anxious about the sudden development. It must be about your promotion request, Jinbei warned. Be careful. Sung-yoon recommended Sun Deok for that position, and since you humiliated him, he will undoubtedly rig the exam against you. Why are you suddenly rushing to become a full instructor anyway? Sabigan simply chuckled. Because it's the first step toward restructuring this entire academy, Sabigan replied, adjusting his robes as he walked through the candlelit corridors. Years ago, the Dragon Spring Academy was revered as the finest of the 3 major orthodox institutions. However, its decline began 2 years prior when the director, Sir Jung, one of the realm's 10 Grand Masters, vanished without a trace. With no clues found after a 2-year search, replacing a Grand Master proved impossible, and the academy's prestige plummeted. Sabigan arrived at the main administrative hall. Inside, 2 figures sat waiting. Let us confirm this one last time, a voice echoed. Assistant Instructor Sabigan, are you absolutely certain you wish to proceed? The speaker was the corrupt deputy director, Sung-yoon. Sabigan knew exactly what kind of wretched piece of trash the man was. In the original timeline, Sung-yoon was the primary catalyst for the academy's downfall when the demonic invasion struck. When the massive rifts erupted, letting loose horrific monsters that slaughtered the populace, the young disciples of the Dragon Spring Academy fought valiantly but were completely overwhelmed and butchered without mercy. On that fateful day, Sung-yoon had been the very first to flee, abandoning his post. Had the coward stayed to activate the Academy's grand defensive formation, countless student lives would have been saved. The agonizing screams of those sacrificed disciples still echoed in Sabigan's mind. Though the tragedy hadn't happened yet in this altered past, he would never forget the deputy director's hypocritical face. Stepping forward, Sabigan asked coldly, "You summoned me to discuss my senior instructor promotion examination? What is the assignment?" "Your task is to single-handedly subjugate the demonic Night Fortress," Sung-yoon replied with a sinister smile. Sabigan narrowed his eyes. They were ordering a solo raid against the notorious bandit stronghold occupying the ancient sacred mountain just beyond the academy's borders. Citing frequent raids on local villages, the official decree demanded immediate eradication for the safety of the populace. It bore the seal of the Dragon Spring Academy, authorized by Sung-yoon himself. Sabigan skimmed the paper. Eradicating criminals is fine, but since when is a master-level extermination required for a standard promotion? The second person in the room, a senior sword instructor named Bu Jun, interjected condescendingly. A senior instructor represents the core military might of this academy. Every individual holding that title is a recognized martial master of the Orthodox Alliance, possessing a proven record of martial merit. Bu Jun gestured to himself and Sung Yoon, noting that all senior staff had earned their titles through blood and achievement, alongside senior archery instructor Buke, master of the Soul Tracker arrow, and senior sword instructor Pilji, the legendary Shadow Divine swordsman. Every single one of us has slain unorthodox executioners or cleared elite bandit camps. Bu Jun sneered. I see, Sabigan interrupted calmly. What is the time limit? Irritated by his lack of deference, Bu Jun barked, You have exactly 2 weeks. If you are late by even a single day, your application is permanently forfeited. 2 weeks, understood, Sabigan replied, turning on his heel and exiting without bowing. Bu Jun slammed his fist down. Insolent brat. Deputy Director, do you truly intend to award him the title if he somehow survives? Sung Yoon let out a low chuckle. Do not fret, Instructor Bu Jun. There is absolutely no need to worry about the future of a dead man. Assistant Instructor Sabigan will never return from that mountain. Meanwhile, Sabigan walked briskly back to his quarters, fully aware of Sung Yoon's malicious intent. The demonic night fortress was an absolute death trap for any ordinary martial artist. Around this point in history, the Green Forest Alliance was only beginning to expand its notoriety, meaning the general public still underestimated local strongholds. The true danger lay in the master of that fortress, Wu Hian, a ruthless combatant who had secretly attained the peak realm. Wu Hian was no petty bandit king. He was the fallen grandmaster of the unorthodox Heaven Destroyer sect. Believed dead after an internal coup years ago, he had quietly survived, systematically hunted down every single traitor who betrayed him, and rebuilt his power base in isolation. The intruder's swordsmanship was incomprehensibly fast and precise. Worse, Sabigan looked utterly bored, parrying peak realm strikes with a single hand, driven to near madness by frustration. Wu Hian unleashed his ultimate trump card, the Heaven Destroyer Divine Art, Core Release, sending his internal energy into a violent frenzy. But Sabigan wasn't planning an ordinary raid. Moving out that very night toward the mountains, he analyzed his odds. If Wu Hian's current strength matched his memories, standard fourth circle magic alone would create a dangerously close fight. Fortunately, his destination contained the perfect remedy. He needed to forcefully break through his mana limits and ascend his magic circles. While his physical body was constrained, his soul possessed the absolute comprehension of an 8th circle archmage. Entering a secluded cavern, he approached what looked like a solid rock wall, recognizing it as a cloaking barrier constructed from pure mana. No martial artist in the Central Plains suspected that the Demon Vanguard had hidden secret caches across the continent centuries prior to the invasion. These chambers contained special-grade magic stones, vital power sources designed to sustain the demonic forces during their initial dimensional transit. Due to temporal desynchronization within dimensional corridors, inanimate objects transported far slower than living beings. To bypass this restriction, the demon army planted high-density energy resources within the target dimension ahead of time. To a local human, these stones were useless rock, but to Sabigan, they were pure refinement fuel. Absorbing the raw energy from the cache, Sabigan successfully expanded his core. The scene cuts to the outer perimeter of the bandit fortress at midnight. A group of heavily armed sentries were patrolling the rocky terrain. Are you sure you felt something? One whispered. There shouldn't be anyone out here. Shut up and stay alert, another hissed nervously. If the fortress master thinks we're slacking, he'll flay us alive. I definitely sensed a massive surge of energy nearby. Emerging from the shadows behind them, a cold voice cut through the dark. Your senses aren't entirely useless for a common bandit. Alerted by the disturbance, Wu Hian himself stepped into the clearing, his oppressive peak realm aura flaring. Who goes there? The bandit king demanded, drawing his blade. Sabigan stepped calmly into the moonlight. Just a humble instructor from the Dragon Spring Academy, sent to clear out some trash. An academy instructor? Wu Hian scoffed. Then you were the fool radiating that massive power signature a moment ago. Without another word, Wu Hian unleashed a devastating shockwave, leaping forward to cleave the intruder in two. Sabigan raised a casual magical shield to deflect the blow, blinding the bandit master with the impact. Before the sentries could react, Sabigan conjured a blade of pure mana, effortlessly decapitating the guards in a single fluid sweep. Wu Hian watched his elite men drop instantly, his arrogance replaced by sudden dread. They clashed blades, energy sparks illuminating the dark forest. Who the hell are you? Wu Hian roared, throwing his full weight into the assault. He's got very fast moves, but he's already told you he's an instructor at the Dragon Spring Academy, but this one can't believe it. He's a wretch, He's not even having any trouble fighting him. He starts to deploy a whole lot more power, because he's frustrated and uses the Heaven Destroyer's Divine Arts core release. "I will tear you to pieces," Wu Hian screamed, his aura burning crimson. "I survived being thrown off a cliff by traitors, hoarding this energy for years just to exact my revenge." Sabigan sighed. "I don't care about a minor villain's backstory." Snapping his fingers, an advanced frost spell instantly locked the Bandit King's legs to the stone floor. Before Wu Hian could shatter the ice, glowing chains of astral magic erupted from the ground, binding his arms securely. As the chains tightened, they began draining his internal energy directly. "What is this sorcery?" Wu Hian gasped, feeling his power wither away. "Are you a dog of the demonic cult?" "It's standard high-level magic, not sorcery," Sabigan replied, looking down at him, "though I didn't expect a bandit to know the difference." Tears of pure rage leaked down Wu Hian's face. "To die here, before I could kill the bastards who ruined my sect. Everything I endured was for nothing. I even swallowed my pride to cut deals with corrupt Orthodox Alliance officials just to keep this stronghold safe while I recovered my strength." Sabigan's expression softened slightly. "A slow, thorough revenge without ever giving up. I can respect that mindset. But you think your life was hard? You have no idea what real suffering is. You're just a privileged academy brat." Wu Hian spat. Sabigan's eyes flared with a terrifying ancient light. "A privileged brat? Let me show you the hell I endured for hundreds of years, and then you can tell me if my life was easy." Invoking a mental transmission spell, Sabigan flooded the Bandit King's consciousness with his memories. Wu Hian saw the sky tear open, witnessed continental slaughters, felt the unbearable weight of a slave soldier's life, and looked into the terrifying eyes of the Demon King, Tarrant. Broken by the sheer scale of the horror, Wu Hian fell to his knees, sobbing frantically. "Kill me, please, just make it stop." Sabigan granted his request, cleanly severing his head. The scene cuts back to the administrative office of the academy. Sung-yoon and Bu-jun stared in absolute horror at the severed head resting on the table. "I figured you wouldn't believe me if I just brought his sword," Sabigan said casually, dusting off his hands. "Now, let's discuss my senior instructor benefits." The entire senior staff was thrown into complete disarray. The man who was the running joke of the academy just last week had successfully completed an impossible solo raid. News quickly reached the rest of the faculty, including senior fist instructor Wang Ying. "Did he truly annihilate the entire fortress by himself?" Wang Ying asked incredulously. Senior archery instructor Buke nodded grimly. He had personally investigated the mountain that morning, discovering the slaughtered bandits and Wu Hian's headless corpse exactly where Sabigan had indicated. "Every single guard was taken down with a single, precise, lethal strike," Buke reported. Bu-jun slammed the desk, refusing to believe it. "This is ridiculous. Are you claiming that talentless fraud was secretly an elite master of swordsmanship this whole time? Your eyes must have played tricks on you," Buke frowned. "Go check the bodies yourself if you doubt my word." "Enough," commanded Deputy Director Sung-yoon, his voice shaking with restrained fury. The situation defied logic. He had personally verified through Alliance intelligence that Wu Hian was an elite peak realm martial master. For Sabigan to eradicate such a powerhouse and his entire crew in a few hours was impossible, a feat even Sung-yoon couldn't achieve. He wondered if old Jinbaek had assisted him, but the physician lacked the combat capability. "We need answers," Sung-yoon muttered, turning to Instructor Buke. "Is your contact within the Ghostly Shadow Mansion still active?" The Ghostly Shadow Mansion was the premier intelligence and assassination guild in the Murim, notorious for extracting any secret for the right price. "Deploy them immediately. I want a complete file on Sabigan, his history, his movements, and every single thing he does daily." Bu-jun smiled wickedly. "Even if we are forced to grant his promotion today, I've already ensured his tenure will be short-lived." He handed Sung-yoon a scroll containing the roster for Sabigan's mandatory student class. Upon reading the names, Sung-yoon smiled. It was a brilliant, underhanded exploitation of academy protocol. The class consisted of individuals so notoriously difficult that a rookie instructor would be forced to resign in disgrace within a week. "Did he accept the roster?" Sung-yoon asked. Buke nodded. "I handed it to him right before the general meeting. He looked at the list, smiled, said he understood perfectly, and left." What the corrupt administration failed to realize was that Sabigan was playing them like violins. They were doing exactly what he anticipated. When he had activated the divine regression authority of Nenizurum, he had asked himself 1,000 times how to properly prepare for the coming apocalypse. A single martial artist, no matter how powerful, could not halt an interstellar demonic legion that had systematically conquered countless worlds. To win, he needed to forge an invincible army of his own, not comprised of the rigid, fragile traditionalists who perished in the old timeline, but a vanguard trained in both devastating magic and elite martial arts. The Academy administration had deliberately filled his class roster with the most volatile, unmanageable, or supposedly talentless outcasts of the freshman year, assuming they would break him. Those fools had no idea that among these very problem students were the two greatest war heroes of the future invasion. One would become a transcendent martial prodigy in his early 20s, acting as the supreme commander who united the fractured factions of the Murim against the darkness, the future sovereign of the Heavenly Sword Alliance. The other would become an unparalleled master archer, leading a legendary guerrilla assassination squad that struck terror into the Demon High Command. Sabigan smiled as he stood outside the courtyard, looking at his new students. As of today, I am your official instructor, and I am going to turn you into monsters. Inside the training courtyard, a violent scuffle was already underway. Get up, a bullying voice barked. Your conditioning isn't over yet. It was Bak Ok, a thuggish freshman from the Tiger Dragon escort agency family. On the receiving end of his heavy fists was Lee Jun, a battered student who was desperately holding his hands up. As the heir to the minor Star Sword clan, Lee Jun was a frequent target. Stop, please, Lee Jun wheezed. Bak Ok laughed brutally. Stop, you should be begging for more. I'm giving you a first-hand demonstration of my family's mountain-splitting fist art, you pathetic weakling. Bak Ok raised his fist to strike again, mocking Lee Jun's family style. Lee Jun clenched his fists in silent rage, but before Bak Ok's strike could land, a calm voice cut through the courtyard, freezing everyone in place. The academy testing cycle is approaching. Cease this pointless squabbling immediately, announced Wu Zhong, a prestigious clan prodigy known as the future hope of the alliance. Bak Ok scoffed, backing away from Wu Zhong's sharp gaze. Suddenly an administrative chime rang out, calling for cadets Wu Zhong, Bak Ok, and Lee Jun. They were informed that by decree of Deputy Director Sung Yoon, they were being stripped of their elite class placements and reassigned to a newly formed remedial group. As they arrived at the auxiliary grounds in confusion, Sabigan stood waiting for them. Welcome to your new reality, gentlemen. Bak Ok immediately blew his top. Stop messing with us. We get reassigned out of nowhere, and our new master is the Academy's biggest joke? I refuse to follow a single order from a talentless fraud like you. His voice dripped with insolence as he stepped aggressively toward his new superior. I don't care what trick you pulled to get a senior title, you can't even harness internal energy. Sabigan smirked, performing a minor spatial flicker that brought him directly into Bak Ok's blind spot. According to Article 3, Section 5 of the Academy Code, Sabigan murmured, an instructor is fully authorized to use physical disciplinary actions to correct a student's insolent behavior. With a heavy stomp, Sabigan shattered the stone tile beneath them. Enraged, Bak Ok swung a full-force mountain-splitting fist, ignoring the rules by activating his internal energy without permission. Unsanctioned energy usage, disrespect to faculty, and above all, utterly pathetic execution. Sabigan catalogued calmly. Catching the punch effortlessly, Sabigan delivered a swift, brutal palm strike that launched the bully into the air, crashing hard onto the pavement. Get up. Your correction has barely begun. The surrounding students watched in absolute silence. Bak Ok was the undisputed heavyweight champion among the freshmen, yet he was being handled like an unruly toddler. When the bully tried to lung up again, Sabigan casually swept his legs out from under him with a precise kick. What a disappointing display for our first lesson. As Sabigan raised his hand to deliver another disciplinary strike, a swift wooden training sword intercepted his path. This is becoming excessive for a simple classroom correction, Instructor Sabigan, a cold voice interjected. Sabigan smiled internally. The prodigy Wu Zhong had finally decided to step in. Wu Zhong, the future Grand Sovereign of the Heavenly Sword Alliance. Currently, he was merely the arrogant second son of the prestigious Destructive Sword Clan, one of the foundational families of the Central Plains martial elite. Hailed as a once-in-a-generation swordsmanship prodigy since infancy, his raw execution completely outclassed the Academy's standard curriculum. The traditional training protocols of the Dragon Spring Academy were practically a playground for a talent of his caliber. In the original timeline, by age 20, he had shattered records to become the youngest peak realm combatant in history, securing a spot among the top 10 masters of the continent. He was destined for a life of absolute reverence and prestige, admired by every living soul in the Central Plains. But that destiny was rewritten when the rifts opened. During the initial wave of the invasion, his family's prominence made them a prime target for a concentrated demonic assault. His entire clan was brutally slaughtered, leaving him as the sole survivor of a ruined lineage. Yet, he didn't break. Forging his grief into absolute lethality, he traveled across the war-torn continent, gathering survivors and building a grand coalition that completely dissolved the historic boundaries between orthodox and unorthodox factions. Sabagan remembered him vividly on the front lines, a beacon of radiant sword ki that sliced through colossal demonic beasts like hot knives through butter. Wu Zhong was the ultimate hope of humanity, but right now he was just an entitled, snobbish young noble questioning his instructor's authority. "Lower your hand, instructor." Wu Zhong commanded, his wooden practice blade steady. "Do you find it amusing to assert dominance over students who are clearly beneath you?" Sabagan slowly lowered his gaze to meet the prodigy's eyes. "It is certainly surprising that a baseline assistant instructor suddenly cleared his meridians," Wu Zhong continued coolly. "But using that minor newfound strength just to bully fresh initiates is utterly pathetic behavior for a teacher." Sabagan chuckled. "You have a sharp tongue. If you follow my training syllabus, perhaps I'll share my secrets with you." Wu Zhong scoffed. "No thank you. I have zero intention of learning from someone who simply got lucky. I don't know what administrative trick you played to alter our rosters. I will be filing a formal complaint with the directorate to reverse this transfer immediately. Let's go, everyone." As Wu Zhong turned to leave, Sabagan let out a boisterous laugh. "You really think your family's style makes you untouchable, don't you? You truly believe I have nothing to teach you? What if I told you that with just a single week of my instruction, this pathetic weakling over here could completely crush you in a duel?" Sabagan pointed straight at the trembling Li Jun. Wu Zhong froze, turning back with absolute disbelief. "What did you just say?" "I said, after 7 days of my training, this boy, whom you look down upon like an insect, will break your perfect record," Sabagan repeated loudly. Li Jun panicked, but Sabagan slapped a hand over the boy's mouth. Wu Zhong's elite pride was thoroughly stung. "Are you willing to bet your career on that absurd claim?" "Absolutely," Sabagan smirked. 7 days from now, an official dueling match. If Li Jun wins, you will drop the attitude and follow my training without a single complaint. If you win, you can demand whatever you want. My resignation, a public apology on my knees, name your price." "Fine. Prepare your paperwork because I will not hold back," Wu Zhong said, walking away. The moment the prodigy left, Li Jun dissolved into full panic. "Are you completely insane? Why would you promise that? I can't fight Wu Zhong. He'll kill me." Sabagan knocked him upside the head. "Quiet down and listen to me." Dismissing the rest of the class for the day, Sabagan dragged the panicked boy to a private training ring. "Why are you assuming you're going to lose? All you have to do is execute my instructions perfectly, and you will win." "You don't understand," Li Jun cried. "In our first placement spar, Bak-ok beat me within inches of my life, and yet when Bak-ok challenged Wu Zhong, he couldn't even touch the fringe of his robes before being utterly dominated. The gap is impossible." Sabagan knew the gap was real, but he also knew the secret to closing it. "Wu Zhong is a genius." "Yes," Sabagan said, placing a firm hand on the boy's shoulder. "But your latent potential, Li Jun of the Star Sword clan, actually outclasses his. Your family just has no idea how your body actually works." Li Jun blinked, utterly bewildered by the claim. In the old timeline, this timid boy eventually unlocked his unique energetic composition to become the continent's most feared sniper. "Why do I have to be dragged into your pride war with the elite clans?" Li Jun muttered. Sabagan leaned in, his smile turning dangerous. "Don't you want absolute revenge?" "Revenge?" Li Jun echoed. "Think about it," Sabagan prodded. "How did it feel when Bak-ok was grinding your face into the dirt earlier? Did it make you happy? Or did a part of you burn with rage because you were too weak to fight back? You want to stay a punching bag forever? You said it yourself, not even Bak-ok can scratch Wu Zhong. Imagine the look on everyone's faces when the boy who couldn't beat a bully suddenly shatters the Academy's golden boy. Don't you want to take your destiny into your own hands?" Li Jun's trembling slowly stopped, a spark igniting in his eyes. I do want to be strong." "Good. Then let's fix your broken foundation," Sabagan declared. He instructed Li Jun to run through the foundational forms of the Star Sword style. As the boy executed the strikes, Sabagan monitored the flow of internal energy within him. Li Jun poured his sweat into the forms, pushing his physical body to the limit against a wooden training dummy, trying to mimic the high-speed parries required to survive an elite swordsman. Yet, halfway through a standard sequence, his energy violently fluctuated. Li Jun gasped, clutching his chest as he collapsed to the floor, coughing violently. "It's happening again," the boy groaned. "Whenever I accelerate my pace, my internal energy just completely scatters across my body. My clan elders told me I simply lacked the discipline to retain ki. They checked my dantian and my primary pathways, but found absolutely nothing structural. They concluded I was just a martial failure, born with a defective spirit. You don't have defective pathways, you possess ultra-wide spread-out meridians. In high-level magic theory, this is known as an expansive conduit matrix. It means your internal channels are massive compared to an ordinary human, requiring 5 times the volume of energy to properly pressurize and stabilize. Because your current pool of internal energy is average, when you try to channel it through those massive conduits, the pressure drops to near zero and the energy simply diffuses out of your system, rendering your strikes weak and causing physical backlash. Li Jun looked up in absolute awe. No one had ever explained his condition with such flawless precision. It made perfect sense. Then, am I completely hopeless? I can't grow my energy pool tenfold in 7 days. We don't need to permanently grow your pool right now, Sabigan grinned wickedly. We just need to artificially compress what you already have. Instead of fluidly flowing your energy like standard Murim arts dictate, you are going to forcefully hoard it inside your dantian until the absolute last second. Under Sabigan's precise direction, Li Jun spent hours practicing the high-pressure compression technique. When he finally unleashed a basic forward thrust, the compressed energy burst through his wide pathways with explosive force. The wooden training dummy was shattered into splinters. I did it! The energy didn't scatter! Li Jun cheered, ecstatically experiencing his true power for the first time. A second later, his face drained of color, and he passed out cold from sudden energetic exhaustion. Waking up hours later, his entire body felt completely drained. That is the natural side effect of high-density compression on an unconditioned body, Sabigan explained, tossing him a recovery tonic. Your wide pathways aren't used to that level of pure kinetic pressure yet. Your body will adapt over a few months, but since your match is in less than a week, we have 2 massive tactical hurdles to overcome before you step into that ring. First, because your current pool is small, compressing it means your entire offensive capability is restricted to a single all-or-nothing strike. Once you unleash it, your reserves are completely spent. Second, you cannot pre-compress the energy before the match begins. Holding that level of volatile pressure inside your small core for more than a few minutes will cause a catastrophic meridian deviation. It must be generated entirely during active combat. How long did it take you to reach full compression during our test? Sabigan asked. Li Jun swallowed hard. About 7 minutes. Exactly, Sabigan said. Which means you need to survive against a high-speed prodigy for 7 whole minutes without using a single drop of offensive energy. How on earth am I supposed to hold Wuzhong off for 7 minutes? Li Jun cried. Simple, Sabigan smirked, raising a heavy wooden staff. You are going to dodge like an absolute demon until your timer hits 0. Begin. Without warning, Sabigan lunged forward. Using low-level sensory illusions, Sabigan made his staff appear like a dozen shifting weapons. Li Jun was relentlessly battered, crashing into the dirt repeatedly. Get up, Sabigan barked. I'm not even using internal energy. Focus on my weight distribution and predict the trajectory. This isn't mindless hazing. This is structural spatial recognition training. It is the absolute only way your current self can survive a single exchange with Wuzhong within a week. The training was a relentless, agonizing gauntlet of pain. Is this pain worse than the humiliation you endure every single day from Bak-ok and the rest of the academy? Sabigan taunted. Li Jun's eyes burned with determination. Gritting his teeth, he stood up, raising his wooden sword. Again, I can do this all day if I have to. The grueling training continued non-stop for the remaining 6 days. Finally, the day of the public duel arrived. The arena was packed with students and faculty. In one corner stood the immaculate Wuzhong. In the other, a quiet, focused Li Jun. How many seconds do you think the weakling will last? A student mocked. Bak-ok sneered from the front row. He spent the entire week just getting beat up with a wooden stick by that crazy instructor. He's going to get blasted out of the ring in a single move. Sabigan stepped up to the center platform as the official judge. Wuzhong drew his high-grade training blade, looking bored. Let's get this over with, Instructor Sabigan. I assume your resignation papers are already signed? Sabigan smiled. Before we begin, let's officially formalize the terms of our wager in front of the witnesses. If you win, I leave, Sabigan confirmed. But if Li Jun secures even a single clean draw or victory, you will remain in my special purpose class and follow my regime without question. Wuzhong nodded dismissively. Agreed. Let the match commence. Sabigan stepped back, raising his hand. The rules are simple. Victory is achieved via submission, disarmament, or knockout. Any intentionally lethal strikes will result in immediate disqualification. Combatants, take your stances. Begin. The instant the word left Sabigan's mouth, Wu Zhong unleashed a terrifying wave of bloodlust. To the unconditioned Li Jun, it felt like a physical blow, making his arm feel completely numb from raw panic. "Surrender now," Wu Zhong said coldly, closing the distance instantly. "You don't belong on this stage." Li Jun's knees trembled under the crushing pressure of the prodigy's aura. Doubt flared in his mind. How could a single week of training bridge a lifetime of elite cultivation? He felt completely frozen as Wu Zhong's blade came down. "Li Jun," Sabigan's voice cut through his panic like a lightning bolt. "Are you going to let his aura make you a coward again, or are you going to execute the plan?" Remembering the agonizing hours of the past week, Li Jun's focus snapped back into place. His timer had started. Wu Zhong executed a lightning-fast opening sweep, but using the spatial prediction metrics Sabigan had drilled into him, Li Jun narrowly shifted his weight, parrying the edge with a desperate block. The sheer force nearly scattered his compressing internal core. Wu Zhong frowned, immediately transitioning into his clan's signature style, the supreme sky-cutting dragon sword, first stance. The stance unleashed a flurry of rapid, piercing wind strikes, yet to Wu Zhong's immense surprise, the clumsy boy was slipping through the gaps of his technique with uncanny rhythm. It was almost as if Li Jun knew exactly where the strikes were landing before they were even executed. Frustrated, Wu Zhong escalated to the third stance. Twin Dragon Fang separation split his trajectory into two simultaneous arcs. But Sabigan had spent the entire week mimicking this exact high-level style using his wooden staff. Recognizing the form instantly, Li Jun leaped cleanly over the sweeping arc, evading the masterfully placed trap. Wu Zhong's technique was undoubtedly flawless, fast and precise, matching its reputation as the premier sword style of the continent. But because Sabigan had exposed Li Jun to its exact mechanical sequence day in and day out, the boy was executing perfect counter-evasions. The crowd was utterly spellbound. Wu Zhong leaped back, his breath hitching slightly. He looked at his opponent with a completely rewritten expression. "I apologize for calling you a failure," Wu Zhong said, his tone turning dead serious. "Somehow, you know the mechanical pathways of my family's style, but knowing the forms won't save you from absolute power." Wielding his blade with both hands, Wu Zhong channeled a massive vortex of concentrated sword ki. He was invoking the absolute peak technique of his lineage. Ferocious dragon annihilation. The entire arena rumbled from the raw kinetic pressure. "If you can survive this form, I will willingly concede." Instead of backing away from the terrifying swirling vortex, Li Jun did something completely insane. He took a solid step directly forward into the attack radius. The scene flashes back briefly to the night before the duel. Sabigan had looked at him sternly. "Wu Zhong will eventually unleash his ultimate AoE technique, Ferocious Dragon Annihilation. But if he continually dodges your sword strokes, he will prepare a counter-offensive. If you survive his initial chain, he will likely deploy the largest-scale technique Wu Zhong can currently unleash, Ferocious Dragon Annihilation. It literally materializes a massive aura that mimics a devouring dragon, generating a crushing wall of sword ki." Listen closely. No technique in this world is truly flawless. The Ferocious Dragon Annihilation relies entirely on outward momentum. Because it spins in a strict rotational vector to generate mass, the absolute center of the vortex, the origin point, is completely hollow. Instead of running away like a coward, you must step directly into the eye of the storm. Maintain your stance, slip through the initial centrifugal wave, and close the distance. Your 7 minutes will be up at that exact moment. Wu Zhong will be utterly shocked to see you standing right in front of him unharmed. His posture will break for a fraction of a second as his brain scrambles to comprehend how his ultimate move failed. That is your opening. Back in the present, Li Jun successfully slipped into the dead zone of the vortex. As Wu Zhong's posture faltered in sheer disbelief, Li Jun unleashed his fully compressed internal energy in a single, explosive overhead strike. The raw kinetic pressure shattered Wu Zhong's high-grade training blade into 1,000 pieces. Li Jun's legs instantly gave out, and he collapsed to the floor from total energy depletion. Wu Zhong stared at his broken hilt, completely frozen. Sabigan stepped between them, raising his hand to signal the end. "That's enough. The match is over. One combatant has been disarmed, and the other is physically incapable of continuing. According to the strict rules of the Academy, the official duel between Wu Zhong and Li Jun is declared a technical draw. Neither party's punitive conditions are valid." The crowd erupted into loud cheers and frantic whispers, completely blown away by the historic performance of the remedial student. Wu Zhong gripped his broken hilt, glaring at Sabigan. "You planned this outcome from the start, just to force me to stay in your class, didn't you?" Sabigan smiled warmly. "Think whatever you like. If you want to protect your petty pride by walking away, go ahead. I don't waste time teaching students who lack the drive to grow. Sabigan knelt down and hauled the exhausted Lee Jun onto his feet. As the crowd chanted the boy's name, Sabigan whispered in his ear, "Listen to that applause. Feels exhilarating to prove them all wrong, doesn't it?" This is just the beginning. The next morning, when Sabigan opened the doors to his private training hall, both Lee Jun and a solemn, quiet Woo-jong were sitting firmly in their seats. His core vanguard was officially assembled. Meanwhile, inside the administrative tower, Deputy Director Song Yoon was pacing furiously. "How did a simple disciplinary setup turn into a public triumph for that fraud?" he roared at Boo Jun. The entire purpose of assigning him those difficult students was to force his immediate resignation. Instead, the top prodigy of the destructive sword clan, Wu Zhong, and the heir of the Star Sword clan are actively refusing to transfer out of his unit. If we force another administrative override now, the prominent clans will suspect we are sabotaging their heir's education. Leaving a weapon like Wu Zhong in the hands of a wild card threatens our entire geopolitical leverage. Bu Jun sweat profusely under the deputy director's intense glare. "This is a total disaster. How do you plan to fix this mess?" Technically, the match was declared a draw, Bu Jun stammered. But among the student body, it's being whispered as a humiliating defeat for the elite clan. Sabigan is becoming an untouchable icon overnight. We can't handle him through standard disciplinary channels anymore. The more we probe into Sabigan, the less sense he makes, Sung Yoon growled, narrowing his eyes. We cannot allow an unvetted asset to control our best disciples. Speaking of which, where is the intelligence report from the ghostly Shadow Mansion? They were supposed to deliver their findings today. Before Bu Jun could answer, the shadows in the corner of the room violently coalesced. A simple group of mercs. You should watch your tongue when addressing your betters, Deputy Director. Seung Yoon immediately pulled his blade, his heart hammering against his ribs. He was a peak realm combatant, yet he hadn't detected a single shred of presence before they spoke. A masked operative stepped forward from the darkness. "We are here to deliver the intelligence files regarding your target, Sabigan." The operative tossed a sealed document onto the table. The guild had charged an exorbitant fee of 100 nyangs just to run a standard background check on a baseline academy instructor, a testament to their flawless espionage record and absolute discretion. The scene cuts to the rooftops overlooking the academy grounds later that evening. Two masked assassins, number 5 and number 7 of the ghostly Shadow Mansion, were maintaining absolute concealment. These hypocritical orthodox leaders pay a fortune just to spy on their own people. Number 7 sneered under his breath. "Quiet," number 5 commanded. "Our contract demands a comprehensive assessment of Sabigan and his close associate, Dr. Jin Baek. We track his hourly schedule and isolate his power source. Do you truly believe the rumors about a miraculous herb clearing his meridians? A talentless cripple doesn't become a master-level combatant overnight without a massive catalyst." Number 7 replied, "If it's not an ancient inheritance, then he is likely a deep-cover operative infiltrated by a hostile, unorthodox faction. That's what our clients are actually terrified of, which means he could be highly volatile. Maintain extreme caution, do not let him detect our tracking parameters." Number 7 laughed quietly. "Detect us? No matter how fast his swordsmanship is, our guild's specialized concealment arrays are structurally undetectable by standard martial senses." Below them, Sabigan was casually walking through the courtyard, chatting amiably with Jin Baek. "The entire campus is talking about your duel, Munib," the old physician said softly, a look of profound worry on his face. "But prominence breeds immediate danger. The administration will surely target you now." Sabigan smiled reassuringly. "Let them try, Father. Envy always tracks the path of progress. There is absolutely nothing to worry about." Jin Baek sighed. "That mysterious inheritance of yours truly changed everything. In the old days, a challenge like that would have ended in tragedy." Sabigan looked out over the horizon. In his original timeline before the temporal loop, he hadn't possessed high-level magic. He had been brutally defeated in that public duel against Sun Deok, giving Sun Yoon the perfect excuse to strip his rank. Reduced to a miserable manual laborer, he eventually left the academy in deep disgrace, with no internal energy. He had survived by joining a local merchant escort agency, devoting his blood and sweat to refining his physical leverage and raw spear movements. Surviving countless high-risk mercenary missions, ambush parameters, and brutal unorthodox raids through sheer physical grit, He had eventually clawed his way up to a first-rate professional escort warrior over a decade of hard service. Those 10 years of constant travel across every single province of the Central Plains had provided him with an unparalleled blueprint of local networks, hidden factions, and strategic geographic data. He had merely returned to the academy for a nostalgic visit on the exact night the rifts opened. Jerking back to the present, Sabigan casually picked up a loose brick from the path. Without breaking his stride, he flung it backward into a dense cluster of trees. "Why did you throw that?" Jinbei asked. "Just swatting a noisy frog," Sabigan replied. Up in the trees, number 7 was clutching his face, blood streaming through his fingers where the brick had perfectly shattered his nose. "That lunatic just broke my face," he hissed. Number 5 checked his parameters in disbelief. "Did he detect our active camouflage tracking?" "No, it's mathematically impossible. It must have been a random throw." Refusing to believe their elite stealth arrays had been compromised, they shifted to an auxiliary vantage point to maintain observation. Sabigan parted ways with Jinbei, entering his private courtyard. Phase 1 of his post-regression strategy was fully operational. He had successfully anchored both Li Jun and Wu Zhong under his direct wing. Later that evening, a quiet knock sounded on his door. Sabigan slid it open to find Wu Zhong standing there, his arms crossed and a deep, conflicted scowl etched across his handsome features. "What brings the elite young master of the destructive sword clan to my humble quarters at this hour?" Sabigan asked smoothly. Wu Zhong stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Cut the crap, Instructor. During the duel yesterday, Li Jun didn't just lucky guess his way through my strikes. He was actively reading every single mechanical transition of my family's supreme sky-cutting dragon sword style. He anticipated my weight shifts, knew the precise angles of my trajectories, and perfectly targeted the exact origin point of my absolute trump card. A minor outsider cannot possess that level of systemic structural knowledge regarding an elite inheritance." Sabigan poured a cup of tea. "Your style is widely praised as the premier swordsmanship art of the current era, Wu Zhong. Martial artists discuss its properties constantly." "Don't play dumb with me," Wu Zhong snapped, slamming his hand down. That wasn't superficial knowledge. He knew the inner flaws. Sabigan's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, penetrating gaze. "Of course he did. I taught them to him. If a genius like you hadn't realized that by now, I would have been profoundly disappointed in your potential. But you didn't come here just to complain about Li Jun. You came because you noticed it too." Wu Zhong froze. For years, through his own extraordinary internal analysis, he had secretly felt that certain core transitions within the supreme sky-cutting dragon sword were structurally inefficient flaws that centuries of traditional veneration had blindly overlooked. To the rest of the Murim, the style was a flawless masterpiece of infinite destructive power and zero blind spots. Yet Sabigan had just casually confirmed the exact conceptual flaws Wu Zhong had spent his childhood silently worrying about. "As the young master, you couldn't openly voice those structural doubts without insulting your ancestors," Sabigan said softly. "But let me tell you something. In 10 years, all these traditional concepts you worship, lineage, prestige, honor, and reputation, will be completely worthless. The only thing that will matter is absolute lethality. If you want to survive what's coming, drop the elite baggage and focus entirely on rewriting your execution. We will talk about restructuring your forms tomorrow." Wu Zhong stared at him, completely captivated by his words. Suddenly, Sabigan grabbed another brick from his hearth. "Excuse me for a moment. There's an exceptionally persistent pest outside." Outside, number 5 was reviewing the target profile. Jinbei's history tracks perfectly as a civilian physician from Gansu before taking over the Academy's medical ward 5 years ago. He possesses baseline defensive forms but zero combat capability. Sabigan's core threat matrix remains structurally anomalous. Number 5 turned to look at number 7, who was currently pressing a healing poultice to his mangled nose. "Are you absolutely certain your positioning didn't trigger his kinetic tracking?" Number 7 growled. "I told you, my active camouflage values were completely green. It was a random stroke of bad luck. We've tracked peak masters across the continent without a single desync." Number 5 muttered, though a cold bead of sweat trickled down his neck. "Maintain your parameters. If we break surveillance now, our contract completion values drop to 0. Just hold your position. If that fraud throws another projectile in this direction, I'm breaking protocol and gutting him myself." Number 7 hissed. "Quiet down, he's moving again." Sabigan stepped out into the dark courtyard, holding a large pitcher of hot water. Walking directly toward the bush where the 2 elite scouts were hidden, Sabigan sighed loudly. "Ah, drank far too much tea tonight." Leaning forward, he aggressively poured the scalding hot water directly onto the patch of grass where the cloaked assassins were crouching. "Son of a..." Number 7 screamed, his camouflage shattering as he scrambled backward from the boiling liquid, realizing they had been completely played from the very start. Number 7 drew his daggers and lunged at Sabagan's throat in a frenzy. Unfazed, Sabagan materialized a dense mana shield that shattered the blades on impact. Before Number 7 could process the magic, Sabagan caught him by the face and violently slammed his head into the stone walkway. Welcome to the Dragon Spring Academy, boys. Number 7 lay unconscious on the ground. Number 5 immediately dropped his offensive stance, putting his hands up in a calculated submission posture. To think an unvetted academy instructor could effortlessly isolate 2 master-level operatives of the ghostly Shadow Mansion. Your capabilities are terrifying, Instructor Sabagan. Sabagan looked at him, his expression completely unbothered. You ran standard surveillance metrics on me because Seung Yoon paid you a shiny 100 nyangs. But aren't you even a little bit curious about how an ordinary human knows your internal code names and tracking parameters? Sabagan smiled darkly. But they will soon find out. They start by cutting off his limbs one by one as the attack begins. Our protagonist unleashes a mana sword, shattering all their incoming strikes. An enemy slips behind him to land a mortal wound, but they aren't nearly as fast as they think as he effortlessly deflects their blows. Although it lacks the raw destructive power of Wu Hyun, it is incredibly fast, precise, sharp, and lethal. Every single technique is a deadly strike aimed at vital points. The sheer energy density infused into this blade is overwhelming. No barrier will hold against it, and it can't be parried with a mana sword forever. If that's the case, he prefers it this way. What exactly do you find so peculiar about the situation? It is hard to pinpoint, but the power and style he uses are fundamentally different from the orthodox sect's martial arts. There is no way he stumbled upon such power by chance. He suspects they are demonic arts, but it strikes him as odd. He has witnessed demonic arts firsthand, and it has been years since the fall of the demon cult. What nonsense. It has nothing to do with that, though he has a point. These aren't conventional martial arts either. He finally realizes this isn't an opponent who can be easily subdued, holding no personal grudge but resolved to take his life. He unleashes the full 100% of the ghostly Shadow Mansion's techniques. It is all for the sake of the ghostly Shadow Mansion's mission. He lunges forward using the soul-destroying stride, moving at blinding speed. It is an exclusive footwork technique that completely erases one's presence while disorienting the opponent with raw velocity. In that brief moment of confusion, a strike lands so quickly it can't even be perceived. But just as the attacker thinks he has won, the protagonist reveals he used an illusion, reappearing right behind him to deliver a crushing blow that slams him into the ground. The subordinate can't believe what just happened to his master. How did he pull that off? He took pride in his absolute stealth, yet it fell short. But the protagonist saw right through it. Now, he wants a deeper word with the Lord of the ghostly Shadow Mansion, or rather, the leader of the Origin sect. The Origin sect is a phantom-like organization within the Jianghu, never appearing at official gatherings, leaving everyone uncertain whether they are orthodox or unorthodox. Their true motives and operations are deeply shrouded in secrecy. In fact, when a massacre wiped out the entire direct bloodline along with their leader decades ago, most of the Jianghu didn't even notice. Only those born, raised, and fiercely loyal to the Origin sect knew the grim truth. The survivors of that tragedy re-emerged under a new moniker, the ghostly Shadow Mansion. Today, they gather and hoard intelligence from every corner of the Jianghu, operating as a premier mercenary network that handles the dirtiest, most dangerous assignments. Yet all of this serves a single purpose: the restoration of the fallen Origin sect. That was the mission he spoke of. To the sect leader, this seems impossible. Their true history is a top-tier secret that hasn't been breached once in decades. The protagonist gets straight to the point, complete 2 tasks for him, and in return, he will provide the intelligence they've been desperate to find. The information they have been chasing all this time. The leader can't believe his audacity. How dare he speak of such things? For 20 years they have roamed the Central Plains with only a glimmer of hope fueling their mission, searching in vain. But then, the protagonist mentions the true bloodline of the Origin sect. More precisely, a unique lineage destined to fully inherit the hidden arts of the remnant Origin sect. You possess a distinct celestial birthmark on your left wrist, do you not? How could this man possibly know that? That mark represents the very core of their sect's restoration, the ultimate reason they have wandered for so long. Even within the ghostly Shadow Mansion, only a select few are privy to this secret. How does he know? But that is all the protagonist intends to share for now. The leader must choose: accept the terms to gain the intelligence, or waste the rest of his life tailing targets, or perhaps just resume their battle. The leader reaches for his hilt, but ultimately sheathes his blade and accepts the mission. However, If it turns out to be a deception, he swears he will make him pay with everything he owns. With the terms set, the protagonist delivers the first task. The scene shifts to a different location littered with defeated bandits. A young woman stands over them, exerting an overwhelming pressure. Her target is the deputy chief of the Black Scorpion Gang, the destructive Fist Demon. After raiding this village with his lackeys, slaughtering the men and brutalizing the women, the surviving townspeople pooled their resources to hire her for revenge. The deputy chief finds himself completely paralyzed, unable to gather a single shred of internal energy. He panics as his inner chi slowly evaporates into nothingness. He curses at her, shouting that he is the second in command and has no fear of what's coming, but she reminds him that she couldn't care less about his title before executing him. Just then, a messenger bird arrives with her next target, an instructor from the Dragon Spring Academy named Sabigan. Cut back to our protagonist, who is busy training Lee Jun. Enough slacking, loosen your shoulders, widen your stance, and lower the angle of your wrist. Hold that position for 200 more counts, Sabigan barked, tapping his training staff against the floor. The student grimaced under the intense scrutiny, wondering why their eccentric new instructor was enforcing such meticulous, bizarre adjustments without offering any explanation. But Sabigan replies that the student is making progress on his own. Lee Jun still doesn't get it, but after receiving another sharp strike, he realizes they are on completely different levels. He needs to shut his mouth and focus entirely on mastering his blade work. Sabigan knows very well that Wu Zhong shouldn't limit himself to the traditional forms of the Supreme Dragon heaven-rending sword style. He needs to trust his instincts and follow the path his sharp senses dictate. That natural genius talent will guide him to a far higher realm. Turning back, our protagonist asks Lee Jun if he has finished his ki circulation. The boy is still anxious, wondering if simply following the circulation path will fix his issues. But there is no shortcut to resolving his unique condition other than steady energy accumulation unless he happens to have rare mythical elixirs stashed away. Of course he doesn't. Therefore, outside of eating and sleeping, he must keep his ki circulating constantly. Sabigan knows the boy feels the pressure. After all, Lee Jun knows the only reason he won that duel against Wu Zhong was through clever trickery. There's no escaping the grind. His foundational issue cannot be resolved overnight. Besides, the protagonist has a far greater issue on his hands. 10 days have passed without word, and if his connections fall through, his plans could be in serious jeopardy. Just then a voice calls out to him. It has been a while since he last ran into Instructor Buke, who looks thoroughly displeased, wearing a deeply sour expression. Sabigan remarks that he's interrupting an ongoing class, to which Buke scoffs internally, knowing the man has just been lounging around. Still, recalling Sabigan's display of power, Buke reins in his attitude and respectfully relays that the deputy director demands his presence. Upon arrival, the deputy director notes it has been a while and asks how things are progressing. Sabigan smoothly replies that everything is going splendidly. Guiding cadets with such extraordinary raw talent makes me truly appreciate my tenure here. It's entirely thanks to your unique roster restructuring that I have such an exceptional unit. Sung Yoon masked his brewing irritation with a false smile. I am pleased to hear your classes are progressing smoothly, Instructor, but as you know, the Dragon Spring Academy operates under the strict oversight of the Orthodox Alliance. Since Sabigan was rapidly promoted to senior instructor despite his lack of tenure, the Alliance has expressed certain reservations. Right on cue, a visitor enters the room. To address these concerns, the Orthodox Alliance has dispatched an official inspector. Her name is Su Yang, representing the Alliance's inspection department. The deputy director quickly clears his throat, momentarily dazed by her striking appearance, though she gracefully acknowledges the greeting. The inspector is a rising prodigy within the Orthodox Alliance, a stellar martial artist who achieved the peak realm at an unprecedented young age. The deputy director warns Sabigan to act with utmost decorum as a senior instructor and to show absolute respect. Sabigan readily agrees, though his gaze suggests a deeper calculation. Flashback to when he received his first task from Number 1, who asked if he was familiar with the Soul Snare's heavenly maiden, the notorious killer. Sabigan wondered why her name came up, but he knew of her a lethal mercenary who operates entirely alone, devoid of any faction or allies. She is legendary for a flawless success rate. Though he has never met her in person, her victims are always discovered with their absolute life force completely drained. Rumor also has it that she possesses unparalleled beauty. Sabigan assumes the assignment is to assassinate her, but Number 1 corrects him. The goal is to lure the Soul Snare's heavenly maiden directly to the Dragon Spring Academy. To execute this, Number 1 must inform Suung Yoon that an unexpected crisis forces him to cancel their current arrangement. Hearing this, the client is utterly outraged that such an abrupt cancellation is happening after all this time, calling it highly unprofessional. Number 1 remains polite but firm, explaining that an urgent priority has taken precedence. As compensation, he offers to personally cover the fees to introduce an absolute expert for the job. Since he has utilized her lethal services multiple times, he can guarantee her involvement. Still, the client questions the choice. She is known as a ruthless, terrifyingly meticulous killer. No matter how powerful you think you are, she will find a vulnerability and execute you. Sabigan waved his hand dismissively. Don't fret over my safety. The operative scoffed internally. You fool if you perish before delivering the intelligence you promised. My operational parameters are ruined. She was indeed a lethal asset, which was precisely why Sabigan needed her. The scene shifts abruptly to a grand fortress hall, dissolving into a deep flashback. Using double-casting magic, he forces his way through the stronghold. Our protagonist wields incredible power, but the Demon King mocks his efforts. Despite enduring successive rounds of 8th-circle high magic, the Dark Lord stands completely unscathed. The Demon King demandingly pressures him to show his true potential, threatening immediate execution if he fails to entertain him. Silencing the tyrant, Sabigan unleashes an atomic burst. The devastating spell surges forward, but a conceptual barrier halts it instantly. The absolute destructive force of the 9th circle spell dissipates the moment it touches the shield, yet the threat is far from over. The Dark Lord counters instantly. Sabigan raises a defense, but the shockwave hits him head-on, snapping him awake from the recurring nightmare. He lets out a dry laugh. No matter how many times he relives it, that memory remains a haunting torment. Nevertheless, he has cleared the most critical hurdle for now. Following his regression, locating and securing Anhwa as quickly as possible was paramount to his strategy. The primary obstacle was that despite her vital role, her exact whereabouts during this specific timeline were unknown to him. Fortunately, Sung-yoon and the ghostly Shadow Mansion moved precisely as anticipated. In the future, even Lee Jun and Woo Jong, some of the strongest combatants, won't come close to matching Danhwa's sheer tactical brilliance. His immediate focus must remain on their rigorous instruction. Arriving at the training grounds, he finds the cadets gathered around, mesmerized by a girl demonstrating flawless, intricate forms. She is strikingly graceful, and her blade technique is masterful. Noticing the audience, she halts her movements and politely greets the instructor. She explains she was simply syncing with her blade as part of her dawn warm-up, hoping she hadn't disrupted anyone's routine. Sabigan assures her that her swordsmanship was nothing short of brilliant. She mentions she had been meaning to speak with him formally and asks if he would join her for a brief stroll. Surprised but composed, he accepts. He commends her exceptional talent, noting it's exactly what one expects from an elite of the Orthodox Alliance, causing her to smile modestly. She demurs, noting there are far greater masters within their ranks. Sabigan notes the irony internally. She is an official inspector, yet her entire persona is a fabricated cover. She turns the compliment back to him, mentioning rumors of his public one-strike victory and how he single-handedly dismantled the notorious Green Forest Alliance. To her, he sounds like the true martial arts master. Sabigan realizes she has been digging into his background. He chalks it up to a fortunate fated encounter, insisting it's nothing to boast about. Su-yang shakes her head, noting the trainees think otherwise, even if his recent training regime has been brutally harsh. He personally addresses their mechanical bottlenecks, never discriminates against minor clan backgrounds, and behaves like a true master. She listened to the scouts' report with a critical eye. They speak highly of him, but look at his physical layout. The specific density of the calluses and muscular development across his palms indicates someone who has spent at least 5, if not 10 years, constantly gripping a live weapon. An unwavering daily grind through blood, sweat, and reopened wounds is the only way to acquire such calluses. She urges him to take pride in his skill, asserting that his power isn't the result of a random stroke of luck, but the mark of a genuine, dedicated martial artist. He looks down at his palms. She remarks that despite his reputation, he has never fully detailed the nature of that miraculous encounter. Asking if he'd share it with her, Sabigan sighs, acting as though he is cornered into being honest. He confesses that his power didn't stem from a grand blessing, nor was it a fate he ever desired. The only reason I claimed it was a miraculous breakthrough was because the local traditionalists wouldn't comprehend high-level magical theory anyway. Sabigan leaned forward, his tone dropping. Have you ever cross-referenced intelligence on an entity known as the Demon Spirit Cult? She froze, cutting him off before he could even finish the sentence. How do you know that name? She demanded, her defensive posture flaring. Sabigan remained silent, knowing she had taken the bait hook, line, and sinker. Decades ago, long before the dimensional rifts would open, a radical splinter group known as the Demon Spirit Cult had quietly separated from the ancient demonic cult. They worshipped the legendary heavenly demon, enforcing a brutal doctrine of absolute strength. As their influence expanded rapidly, the Orthodox Alliance recognized them as an existential threat and declared the faction the ultimate public enemy of the Murim. This triggered the bloodiest conflict in history, Great Orthodox Demonic War. Uncountable masters fell on those battlefields. Ultimately, the conflict concluded with the total eradication of the cult and a decisive victory for the Orthodox Alliance. Since then, the common populace believed the evil had been purged forever, bringing a lasting peace to the Murim. Or so the world chose to believe. In truth, the scattered remnants who survived the purge reorganized in the shadows, adopting a new moniker, the Demonic Spirit Cult. Even the upper echelons of the Orthodox Alliance remain completely oblivious to this revival, save for those who have personally clashed with them. Su Yang intensely demands to know his connection to them. Gripping his arm, he calmly asks her to release him so he can finish his explanation. Recognizing her lack of composure, she lets go with a quiet apology. Sabigan notes that based on her intense reaction, she was already well aware of their existence, causing her to fall silent. She tries to brush off her outburst as nothing, but immediately turns the interrogation back on him, demanding a full, honest account of how he discovered them. Sabigan lets out a calculated chuckle and agrees to lay it out. He claims that right after securing his instructor position, he was deeply frustrated by his inability to wield internal energy. While walking outside the academy gates late one night, he was abruptly abducted before he could even register the threat. He claims he vividly remembers the terrifying figure standing over him when he regained consciousness, who told him he was a mere weed destined to rot, but would now serve a glorious rebirth. The horrifying master had identified himself as the demonic sage, a detail that deeply rattles the inspector. Sabigan spins the tale further, detailing how he was subjected to grotesque biological experiments, forced to swallow experimental poisons, and had his internal organs surgically altered until he woke up left for dead. Instead of traditional internal chi, he claimed he gained the unnatural ability to wield innate core energy. He notes it's a curse rather than a blessing, as burning that energy actively consumes his own life force. Su Yang admits the story sounds completely far-fetched, yet she cannot explain how a man with ruined meridians could possess such power otherwise. He invites her to examine his pulse if she doubts it. Though the tale sounds absurd, she is forced to weigh it seriously because his highly specific details regarding the demonic spirit cult align perfectly with her secret past. Sensing her conflict, Sabigan decides to drive the point home. If you doubt my data, see it with your own eyes. I will take you to the black site where they conducted their human experiments and ultimately abandoned the failures. When I woke up there, the staff had vanished, but the structural residue remains. It's a significant distance from campus, making a midnight transit necessary. If you agree, meet me outside the gates at midnight. She agrees and departs to prepare. In reality, every word out of his mouth was a calculated fabrication. He had never encountered the demonic spirit cult during his previous life, and his abilities have absolutely nothing to do with innate chi. It is pure magic. It is an elaborate ruse. He crafted this deceit specifically to manipulate her, drawing directly from what he knew of her past experiences. In his deeper memories of the dark labs, he recalls how human subjects were experimented upon. He remembers the intense mana rejection symptoms and the conversations between his former demonic captors. Incredible. His energetic tolerance values have spiked again, a detached voice echoed in the White Room. Even compared to biological specimens harvested from adjacent dimensions, his cellular adaptation is exceptional. It's fascinating. Intelligence reports from his home coordinate labeled him a talentless bottom-tier human. Increase the magical output to maximum capacity before termination sequence. Understood. They threw his broken body out like garbage. The memory of those vile monsters makes his blood boil. Back then he lay coughing in the dirt, fully expecting to draw his last breath. He chuckles at the dark irony. Back then he welcomed death. Yet against all odds, Sabigan managed to survive. Stepping out to an isolated area, he notices a tail tracking his movements. Snapping a pebble forward, the hidden figure is forced to show himself, begging Sabigan not to strike. The protagonist dryly comments that the spy should have known better than to think a scout could escape his notice. The agent, number 7, winces, having already been thrashed by him before. The agent hands over a document. The first page is a detailed map outlining a specific coordinate, while the second contains strict instructions for setting up the scene. The target location is an inconspicuous cave hidden behind a sheer cliff face. Once inside, the agent must meticulously copy the cryptic characters from the second page onto the stone walls. He won't understand the dialect, but that doesn't matter. He just needs to cover as much ground as possible before daybreak. The agent tries to protest, questioning the bizarre nature of the request, but Sabigan dismisses him with a cold glare. Even if it's a rushed, overnight fabrication, it will serve its purpose. As long as it looks sufficiently ominous to mislead the inspector, the ruse will succeed, aligning perfectly with his broader agenda. Cut to that night, where the deputy director demands an update on the tracking of the Soul Snare's heavenly maiden. The operative sharply insists on being addressed only as number 1, finding the administrator's sycophancy highly irritating. The deputy director presses for immediate intelligence. Su Yang reflects on Sabigan's words, how his harrowing power was an uninvited curse rather than a miracle. Shaking off the thought, she informs the official that she has no definitive proof yet, stating she requires more time to fully disarm his guard and extract concrete facts. Seung-yu narrows his eyes, convinced that Sabigan is concealing a massive secret. Lately, every action the instructor takes is highly irregular. If he is an operative for an outside faction, it poses an immense threat to their operational security. The administrator states he no longer cares about orthodox or unorthodox alignments. He simply wants the variable removed. If his baseline profile indicates a hostile faction or a hidden agenda, you are fully cleared for immediate execution. Understood? She nodded coldly to her superior. She didn't care if Sabigan's offer was a calculated trap or an absolute lie. If she discovered he was playing a mediocre political game with her, she would personally extract his memories and drain him cell by cell. The following morning, Sabigan focuses on assessing his core. His upper energy core has stabilized and shown marginal improvement thanks to the high-grade mana stone he absorbed previously. Even so, his current capacity only places him roughly at the level of a 6th circle mage. At this threshold, he can confidently handle at least 2 peak real martial masters simultaneously. Within the confines of the academy, save for one notable exception, no one poses a genuine threat to him. However, regarding his problematic lower core, despite its small capacity, he can distinctly perceive a trace of internal chi. His primary channels and meridians are structurally flawless, yet no orthodox cultivation technique or martial art can stimulate them. This is the broken constitution he was born with, a unique physiological anomaly that even Dr. Jin Baek classified as an unprecedented medical mystery. Yet ironically, this exact physical anomaly is the sole reason he managed to survive. Back then, equipped with nothing but rudimentary spearwork and basic external martial arts, he should have been easily killed. Instead, his bizarre resilience caught the attention of the researchers, who chose to use him as a permanent test subject. All of it because of his anomalous physical makeup, interrupting his thoughts. The operative from earlier approaches. He reports that the cave has been fully prepared overnight as requested. Sabigan play-acts amnesia, asking him what exactly he was supposed to have done, which briefly outrages the stressed agent before Sabigan lets him off with a smirk. Commending his work, Sabigan dismisses him. Only one phase remains. Looking over at the training grounds where the students are sweating out their drills, he lays out his next step, lead Su Yang to the fabricated cave, present it as an authentic cult safe house, and feed her a highly convincing script of misinformation. Though the staging is crude in certain sections, it won't matter. The cavern entrance is masked by a minor demonic barrier. To an uninitiated martial artist, it will radiate an uncanny, heretical sorcery, identical to the signatures left by a dark cult. Most importantly, it gives her the precise lead she wants on the demonic spirit cult. Even if she harbors doubts, her sheer obsession will force her to investigate. Turning around, he finds the inspector arriving. He assumes a grave demeanor, preparing to guide her to the coordinate. From there, he plans to feed her meticulously curated false leaks, intentionally stoking her deep-seated desire for vengeance against the cult. He confirms the rendezvous point outside the gates for tonight, confident she is stepping right into his palm. A sudden flashback cuts to a fellow prisoner screaming in agony from the volatile energy injections hammering on the reinforced cell door. The monsters merely observe as the man collapses, his life force burning out entirely. Sabigan tried to intervene, but it was already too late. The man expired right before his eyes. The guards callously dragged the corpse away. Ultimately, only Sabigan and Su Yang were left as the final survivors in that sector. She had mused that other experimental outposts might exist across the region, holding on to a faint hope for more survivors. She lamented their wretched existence, stating it would have been more honorable to fall on a proper battlefield. With a bitter laugh, she noted the absolute absurdity of her plight, mentioning this wasn't even her first encounter with such despair. When asked if she meant her past within the Jianghu, she confirmed it was tied to the demonic spirit cult, sighing that explaining it further to someone who couldn't use qi was pointless. Yet, she eventually confided in Sabigan, leaving him astonished. Her unique ability, the conceptual energy absorption art, was a direct mutation triggered by their horrific experiments. It was the absolute first time she had shared that secret with another soul, admitting she found it remarkable that her power could even drain those non-human entities. She never anticipated her curse would yield such utility. She had sought revenge for a decade, but without a single lead on the demonic spirit cult's upper echelon, she eventually succumbed to despair, realizing the organization was a monolithic shadow completely beyond her scope to destroy. She asked Sabigan if he understood why she threw herself into the vanguard of the war. He assumed it was for the preservation and future of the Murim's martial community, but he was entirely wrong. While the masses fought valiantly to protect the land from the invading otherworldly forces, she confessed she was simply too much of a coward to go on living, yet lacked the nerve to end her own life. She sought out the front lines merely looking for a place to die, never expecting to rot away inside an experimental lab. Sabigan had snapped at her, telling her to stop yielding to despair as if all hope were lost, emphasizing that survival was what mattered. He refused to perish like a dog in a ditch out of sheer spite. He reminded her of his own grueling struggle, enduring constant mockery as a talentless cripple, unable to gather internal qi. He urged her to grit her teeth and steel her resolve. If they could somehow break free from these cells, they would tear down everything. We will hunt down the remnants of that demon spirit cult together and exact absolute vengeance. I will provide the necessary firepower. What do you say? She stared at him for a beat before letting out a bitter laugh. A crippled instructor who can't even harness baseline ki is offering to lead a vendetta. Dynamic nonsense. Sabigan closed his eyes as the phantom pains of his past captivity flared once more. Running into her again post-regression is clearly triggering these echoes, but he cannot afford sentimental distractions. His absolute priority is securing Su Yang as a foundational piece on his strategic chessboard. Right now she doesn't even comprehend the true depth of her trait, but that conceptual absorption is the silver bullet required to shatter Tarrant's absolute defenses. He has no intention of playing the tragic hero or begging for her understanding. He has crossed too many lines to let sentiment slow his pace. Out at the designated perimeter, Su Yang arrives well ahead of schedule to scout the location. She performs a thorough sweeping sweep of the area, finding no hidden ambushes or irregular tracks nearby. She wonders if he spoke the truth about his abduction by the cult. Before they can link up, an abrupt ambush shatters the quiet as a hostile faction lunges straight at her. Cut to a brief flashback of a young girl playing happily in the winter snow under her mother's watchful eye. A soft voice echoed from a shattered dream, a mother warning her child to stay safe before a sudden ambush tore the vision apart. Sabigan snapped awake, his eyes tracking a sudden shifting shadow inside the ruined temple. An elite assassin had slipped through his external wards. Recognizing her specialized silhouette instantly, he muttered, "The soul-capturing heavenly maiden, so you've already aligned with them." He reveals he is seeking blood-dynamic justice for his brother, Deokxion, who fell by her hand. The attacker is none other than the psychotic leader of the Black Death sect, Santak. The Black Death sect is a vile, notorious syndicate infamous for ruthless piracy, abductions, and contract killings throughout the underbelly of the realm. She chides herself for being careless, never realizing the direct familial link between the syndicate's commanders. Her absolute focus on securing a lead on the demonic spirit cult completely blinded her to the trap. Santak crudely scoffs, assuming she used her renowned physical beauty to lower his brother's guard before executing him. Her baseline execution is surprisingly refined, the assassin remarked, adjusting her twin blades. My employer paid a handsome fee for your head. Are you going to keep making speeches? Or did you orchestrate this elaborate meeting just to join your ancestors in the dirt? Sabigan chuckled softly, stepping forward. If my objective was your termination, your heart would have stopped 5 minutes ago. Had the rumors concerning her looks been exaggerated, he would have decapitated her on arrival. Seeing her, he acknowledges her legendary, ethereal beauty. He boasts that he intends to take his time breaking her, beginning by amputating those lethal hands rumored to drain a martial artist's internal energy. He threatens to hand her over to his remaining subordinates before skinning her alive, piece by piece, to appease his brother's spirit. Su Yang finds the display utterly vile, but bites her lip in frustration, realizing she walked into a lethal dead end all because she fell for a fabricated lead on the cult. Instead of finding answers, she's cornered by absolute filth. She resigns herself to this grim fate, viewing it as the natural end for a reckless mercenary. Just as the executioners raise their blades amid mocking laughter, Sabigan bursts onto the scene, utterly destroying their perimeter. She gasped in shock, while the protagonist's eyes flashed with absolute fury. Before she could process his movement, Sabigan bypassed her guard, his hand clamping like a vice around her throat, lifting her clear off the ground. "You tracking units need to understand something," he whispered, his eyes flashing purple. "Your employers almost erased my past 3 centuries." Invoking a raw lightning spell, he vaporized her active backup units into charred dust. Terrified by the unnatural display, the remaining syndicate members rush him en masse. In the blink of an eye, Sabigan vanishes, reappearing directly behind the formation. Unleashing an absolute gale blast, the pressurized vacuum tears through their ranks, followed by a fluid sword strike that clean cleaves another attacker apart. Seeing the luminous mana blade hum with lethal energy, absolute panic grips the survivors as they scatter to flee. Sabigan shows zero mercy, tracking them down systematically until the entire squad is utterly annihilated. Su-yang watches in utter disbelief. She cannot reconcile this absolute monster with the eccentric instructor she had been tracking for the past 48 hours. As the final bandit attempts a desperate blindside assault, she screams a warning. Sabigan doesn't even dodge. The weapon shatters against his magically reinforced stone skin before the attacker can process the absolute defense. Sabigan shatters his jaw with a counterpunch, slamming him down and pinning him under a crushing gravity press. Sabigan prepares to end the vermin, ignoring the bandit's desperate pleas for mercy as he crushes his skull. With the battlefield silenced, the protagonist's intense aura vanishes instantly, replaced by his usual calm demeanor. He turns to her, expressing immense relief that she is unharmed, claiming he tracked her down out of concern when she missed their meeting point. "When you failed to materialize at our designated rendezvous point, I had to expand my sensory sweep to locate your position," Sabigan noted, dropping the unconscious operative onto the stone floor. She immediately scrambled into a defensive martial posture, her eyes wide with hostile distrust. Sabigan realized his baseline pre-regression calculations for a peaceful negotiation had officially failed. He hadn't anticipated the Black Death sect interfering at this exact juncture. He weighs his options, giving up on her is an absolute impossibility. In the grand campaign against the Dark Host, Su-yang is the single most critical asset, an absolute, irreplaceable weapon based on his grim history fighting the Demon King Tarrant. Tarrant's most absolute despair-inducing technique was his nullification barrier, a conceptual shield that rendered all physical and magical offenses entirely useless. Without a method to neutralize that shield first, any vanguard army would be slaughtered. And from his extensive experience, the only individual capable of dissolving that barrier is Su-yang. Currently, she views her trait as a simple mechanism to drain an opponent's internal chi. She remains completely ignorant of its true latent essence, the absolute absorption and erasure of conceptual phenomena. To ensure she can dismantle Tarrant's shield when the time comes, he must accelerate her growth immediately. Since his subtle approach is fractured, he considers subduing her by force to keep her contained. Su-yang warns him to freeze, aiming her weapon directly at Sabigan. Her mind flashes back to their original timeline, remembering him dragging his broken body toward her cell in absolute agony. Under the cold surveillance of the demon guards, his physical form looked as though it were being torn apart from the inside out. His raw mental fortitude was staggering. Though the overseers noted it was a mathematical certainty, his human vessel would soon burst from the absolute mana saturation. They indifferently agreed to let him expire, having extracted all viable experimental data. They viewed him as a disposal risk that might cause complications if left breathing, deciding to discard him like trash. Su-yang had watched as the conflicting magical energies inside Sabigan violently clashed, ripping through his internal systems. Seeing the executioner's approach, Sabigan had looked up at her, weakly begging her to end his life. Unable to bear his defeatism, she had barked at him to shut up and hold on to his resolve, reminding him of his absolute promise that they would escape the facility and hunt down their captors together. Yet, his cellular structure was visibly disintegrating. As his body decayed at an exponential rate, she had made a desperate choice. In the next moment, Sabigan gasped as the violent internal storm completely vanished. Shocked by his sudden stabilization, he asked Su-yang what she had done. She confessed she had acted blindly on pure instinct. She hadn't been certain her trait could process the anomaly, but she managed to draw the absolute corruption out of him. She told him to remain completely still, noting he was seconds away from death. Having discovered her trait worked on the demons, she risked expanding its parameters to absorb his volatile mana alignment. She managed to stabilize him, though the sheer foreign nature of his energy left her physically drained. She mused that if she had understood her potential sooner, she might have saved the others. Sabigan had been furious, calling her insane for risking her life for him. He demanded to know why she would throw herself into the abyss for his sake, to which she cited his own words. "A person of honor doesn't simply discard their vows when parameters shift," she said, her voice dripping with venom. Sabigan sighed. "I only enforce those strict constraints to ensure your immediate survival in this loop. I have no interest in micromanaging your life. Number 1. I simply need you operational for the upcoming campaign." The memory fades back to the present clearing. Sabigan lets out a measured breath and deliberately plants his sword into the earth. Raising his hands to signal he has zero hostile intent, he urges her to lower her guard. Su Yang remains highly taut, demanding to know how he pinpointed her absolute coordinates in this forest. "Furthermore, the structural energy you just deployed doesn't match standard Murim cultivation metrics," she noted sharply. "Don't tell me to blindly believe your claims. Was your intel regarding the demon spirit cult merely an engineered lie to secure my compliance? What is your true identity?" Sabigan shook his head. "Even if I gave you my full designation, your baseline reality wouldn't accept it. Instead, consider my active operational parameters. First, I will provide the structural data required to execute your vengeance against the demon spirit cult. Second, I will personally recalibrate your pathways to double your current kinetic output. Third, I will ensure absolute protection against external purge squads like the one tonight. In return, my condition is absolute. You will enlist as an auxiliary asset at the Dragon Spring Academy and remain within my immediate sector." She stared at him, completely paralyzed by the sheer audacity of his terms. "Remain by your side? What sort of ridiculous joke is this?" She sharply asks if he's making some absurd romantic advance. Sabigan corrects her instantly, explaining his terms are strictly practical. Allowing an asset of her caliber to be neutralized by minor syndicates because they are out of alignment would disrupt his entire timeline. Su Yang completely misinterprets his clinical tone, viewing him as a manipulative rogue who wants her compliant for sinister purposes. "Do you intend to lock my meridians and keep me as a captive pet? I would rather sever my own tongue and bleed out right now." Sabigan's gaze remained dead calm. "If you choose exploration today, who will comfort your family? What would your parents, Lan Lan?" She gasped, her mind violently throwing her back into a forgotten childhood memory. In the memory, an old seer is examining her as an infant, noting her physical health is perfect, but warning that her cosmic alignment carries a deeply tragic, turbulent destiny. The parents, anxious, admit they haven't settled on an official name yet. The seer advises naming her Su Yang. "Names carry unique energetic weight," her father's voice echoed in the vision, gently holding her small hands. "With this title, you will possess the resilience to endure the harshest temporal winters." As a child, she had dismissed her parents' traditional lore as mere bedtime stories, but their absolute conviction had been real. Though her formal registration was locked as Su Yang, they chose an affectionate, radiant pet name for her childhood, Lan Lan, meaning brilliant orchid. They harbored a gentle hope that before the harsh realities of the world caught up to her, she would bloom warmly under their protection. Her mother had assured her she had nothing to fear, promising they would always shield her until the night a mysterious arson reduced her home to ash, and shadowy figures abducted her from the ruins. They had identified her specific anomalous physical constitution, confirming her identity as Su Yang. "Without this blueprint, you would have perished like a common weed in the dark. Consider it an honor to serve the Grand Restoration." Snapping back to reality, she pressed a hidden blade directly against Sabigan's throat. "What are you? How do you possess my childhood designation? That name was never registered in any Murim database. Even if I mapped out the temporal coordinates for you, your current comprehension wouldn't accept it," Sabigan said, gently moving her blade aside with one finger. "My proposal is absolute. Review the metrics, make your choice, and report to my courtyard tomorrow." He turned and walked away, leaving the elite assassin completely shaken by his impossible knowledge. Leaving her completely stunned by his terrifying display of power and eerie insights, Sabigan walks away. He returns to his quarters, fully aware that his sudden departure completely bypassed the Academy's internal scouts. Meanwhile, Li Jun enters to submit his completed assignment, but catches one look at his instructor's blood-soaked attire and flees in absolute terror. Sabigan sighs, collapsing onto his bed, mapping out his next chess move. Next morning, the cadets resume their grueling forms with absolute focus. Sabigan rationalizes that Su Yang's initial flight was a standard tactical response. Given the high volume of anomalies surrounding his behavior, a sharp agent would naturally retreat to verify facts independently rather than blindly accepting his word. Had he been in Su Yang's position, he would have done the exact same. He mutters that he cannot allow a premier asset he tracked for 2 centuries to fall out of alignment due to historical friction. He resolves to secure her position before the operational timeline completely fractures. Right on cue, the training field clears as the inspector steps forward. She exchanges a polite morning greeting with So-So before addressing Instructor Sabigan, requesting a private word. Sabigan maintains his professional cover, leaving the cadets to their drills. Once isolated, she firmly demands he extend his hand. The next morning, she tracked his movements from the courtyard rafters. Her structural analysis detected zero active baseline cultivation signature inside his meridians, yet his real-time output defied standard physics. "You expect me to blindly accept your framework after you manipulated our initial tracking parameters?" she asked, dropping down. "You engineered the entire scenario regarding the demon spirit cult just to force my hand. You are a thoroughly dangerous individual, Sabigan. You've mapped out my history, my lineage, and my operational limits since day one." She admits she strongly considered forcing the truth out of him, though she recognizes his absolute resolve would make interrogation useless. Sabigan confesses he fully expected her to have abandoned the academy by now, given that no sane agent would trust an exposed conman. She cuts him off, stating she is staying for one absolute reason: his guarantee to deliver the demonic spirit cult. "If any segment of your intelligence data proves to be a calculated fabrication, I will personally end your loop," she warned. Sabigan nodded. "My execution vectors are absolute. Your vengeance will be realized." She crossed her arms, a flush of frustration on her cheeks. "Fine, but you kept me awake all night wondering. How the hell do you know my childhood designation?" It was an absolute secret she had never disclosed to a single living soul, not even under the cult's intense torture. Her mind drifts back to that fleeting, beautiful childhood memory of her parents calling her Lan Lan. Sabigan merely smiles, reiterating that even if he offered the true explanation, her logical mind wouldn't accept it. He advises her to focus on preserving that beautiful fragment of happiness rather than obsessing over the mechanics of his knowledge. Their conversation is abruptly cut short as a first-year cadet rushes onto the field. It is So-So, looking completely out of breath. The young girl announces that their entire group is facing an absolute logistical crisis that threatens the status of their special class. Right on her heels, a rival group of elite female cadets arrives, openly mocking their standing. So-So doesn't hold back, detailing the confrontation to Sabigan explicitly. The leader of the rival squad warns that if the special class tarnishes the reputation of the Dragon Spring Academy, she will personally file a formal complaint with the High Council elders to ensure immediate disciplinary action. The speaker is Anhwa, the top first-year genius from the prestigious Moke Sword Flash Clan. The academy relies heavily on the massive financial backing provided by the Moke clan annually. If Anhwa submits a damning evaluation, the administration could easily dissolve the special purpose class entirely. So-So remains defiant, stating that Instructor Sabigan will personally vindicate their standing through raw results. She is confident their instructor will shield them from the political pressure of the Moke clan. Later, during standard inspection drills, Su-Yang observes the students' forms. She corrects a cadet's rigid posture, advising him to prioritize fluid flexibility over raw tension during execution. 2 weeks have quietly passed since the inspector's arrival. While the group initially feared her presence meant a strict administrative crackdown, her constructive, fair guidance has thoroughly earned their respect. Sabigan calls an immediate assembly, announcing a major shift in their organizational status. "As of today, this unit will operate under the structural designation of the SPC," Sabigan announced to his assembled students. Lee Jun blinked. "What does that stand for?" "Special Purpose Class," Sabigan answered coolly. "Your operational mandate exceeds any baseline curriculum within the Dragon Spring Academy. We are training for the absolute defense of the Central Plains." Though Instructor Sabigan frequently exhibits highly eccentric tendencies, his core capability is undeniable. Historically, he was the laughingstock of the campus due to his absolute inability to cultivate internal chi, but his legendary public duel a month ago completely shattered that perception. His sudden display of high-tier energy manipulation stunned the entire faculty, allowing him to easily clear the senior advancement exam and secure leadership of this specific unit. He consistently attributes his growth to a fated encounter, though his personality seems entirely transformed compared to his old self. Regardless of the cause, his promotion has been an absolute benefit for the students. However, Su-Yang openly challenges his grandstanding, reminding him that true defensive operations are not a game for children. Sabigan counters sharply, asking if she considers the security of the Muram a joke. She notes that his unauthorized curriculum lacks formal approval from the High Council. Sabigan merely grins, stating that administrative confirmation is precisely what he is about to secure. Their constant verbal sparring has become a daily routine on the training grounds. While superficial observers see an inspector growing increasingly irritated with a rogue instructor, the underlying reality is that the formal barriers keeping them apart have completely dissolved. The cadets can't help but wonder what exactly transpired between the two masters behind closed doors. Anhwa sharply interrupts the gossip, demanding they focus on relevant intel rather than frivolous rumors regarding faculty dynamics. She pressures Soso to deliver the precise data she was tasked to gather. Let's isolate the high-value targets. Give me a direct progress report on Wuzhong. How is his energetic adaptation proceeding? Soso notes that initially, just like Anhwa, Wuzhong fiercely resisted joining the special unit. However, following a private wager during a public bout, he voluntarily chose to remain. Beyond that, his precise daily routine is difficult to track. From the very start, Wuzhong was exempted from the standard curriculum. Anhwa frowns, assuming Sabigan is simply neglecting his development, but Soso quickly clarifies. While the rest of the class focuses on core fundamentals, she has personally witnessed Wuzhong crossing blades directly with Sabigan on multiple occasions. He is the sole student permitted to spar directly with the master. The rest of his time is spent in silent meditation before the training posts. Sabigan has explicitly forbidden the class from interrupting his concentration, showing clear intent in his development. Anhwa asks if Wuzhong is truly content with this arrangement. Soso notes his expression remains intense and unreadable. Annoyed, Anhwa breaks off the conversation and leaves. Soso watches her go, breathing a sigh of relief. It was only much later that the special class uncovered the absolute truth. Anhwa and Wuzhong had been formally betrothed since childhood. The scene transitions to an isolated rooftop under the cover of night. Sabigan meets with number 1, who commends the instructor for detecting his presence despite using his stealth art at absolute maximum capacity. Sabigan dryly reminds him that such parlor tricks are entirely ineffective against his perception. Number 1 slid a data scroll across the table. His structural alignment is complete. However, regarding your secondary surveillance request, our tracking arrays couldn't isolate the exact coordinates. The target remains entirely hidden within the isolation zones between Wuzhong's clan compound and the capital. The scout focused on 2 exact indicators: a secluded human settlement and an environment undergoing a grotesque, unnatural transformation visible to the naked eye. Those were the exact parameters Sabigan had established. Given the massive scope of the territory, number 1 expected a grueling search, but the distortion was so absolute it was impossible to miss. He admits he has no idea what forces are reshaping the land, but Sabigan knows that even an honest explanation would sound entirely unbelievable to him. In simple terms, it is the absolute herald of ruin. The full-scale demonic invasion of this world is scheduled to occur in 10 years. However, analyzing the current data, Sabigan realizes that the foundational precursors of the invasion are manifesting much earlier than they did in his original timeline. In his past life, anomalous flora and fauna were first logged in the Central Plains roughly 4 to 5 years prior to the breach. Mutated beasts began targeting human outposts 1 to 2 years before the collapse, followed by mysterious, untreatable plagues 6 months before the gates fully opened. It was a systematic campaign, orchestrated by the Dark Commanders. By seeding highly concentrated mana sources across the Central Plains, they utilized a subtle tactic to systematically alter the ecosystem, turning the theater of war into an environment perfectly suited for their host, terraforming. He only uncovered the technical designation for this process long after his capture and enslavement. The coordinate in question marks the absolute future site of the primary dimensional gate, where an entire metropolis was erased from the map within 24 hours of the breach. If the site matches his future memory, foundational traces of terraforming should already be active. While it remains a working hypothesis, the contamination of the Central Plains has clearly begun. He must personally inspect the location to establish early defensive counters. He commends number 1 for his absolute efficiency. The agent promises the complete intelligence package will be routed through a standard courier within a few days, requesting patience while they index the data. Number 1 then looks at Sabigan intently, demanding to know his true identity and ultimate objective. Sabigan simply repeats his previous stance. He has no reason to rush, and when the absolute moment arrives, he will lay out every single detail explicitly. He instructs the operative to prepare for their eventual departure from this wretched institution. The next day, the administration is in deep discussion. The deputy director is reviewing the roster for the upcoming Heavenly Martial Tournament with senior staff. They are selecting the absolute best elite lines from the academy, highlighting Baekjong and Anhwa from the Flying Dragon class. The administrator specifically inquires about the status of Wuzhong. An instructor reports that the prodigy flatly refuses to participate, coldly stating that external exhibitions are a complete waste of training time. The deputy director sighs at the arrogance of young masters, but notes that Baekjong is still a stellar combatant capable of securing victory. He stresses that the internal selection must be completely flawless. The Heavenly Martial Tournament is the premier external event for their institution, an elite summit organized by the Orthodox Alliance featuring the three apex training grounds, the White Martial Academy, the Celestial Academy, and the Dragon Spring Academy. The top-tier talents face off directly, heavily influencing institutional prestige and funding. An instructor hesitantly asks the deputy director if they possess the clear authority to finalize the selections independently. He reminds him that total jurisdiction over tournament logistics originally rested with the grand director. Sung-yoon tells him to dismiss those pointless concerns, noting that the legendary master has shown absolute zero interest in superficial events for years. He has remained entrenched inside his private meditation chamber for the past 24 months without showing his face once. The elders view this as a tacit endorsement to manage the academy's internal layout themselves. Before Boo-joon could finish his thought, Sabagan violently kicked the office doors open. "Speak of the devil," Sabagan chuckled, stepping inside. Sabagan casually greets the panel, announcing a formal proposal in his capacity as supervisor. His specialized class will represent the institution at the upcoming Heavenly Martial Tournament. Sung-yoon is utterly outraged, calling the request an absolute delusion and demanding to know why he thinks such madness would be allowed. Sabagan answers that securing an absolute victory will resolve their prestige issues. The deputy director tells him to drop the baseless nonsense, emphasizing that the tournament is an elite assembly featuring senior arbiters from the Orthodox Alliance. They cannot allow a non-traditional instructor to embarrass them on a global stage. Boo-joon slammed his desk, his aura flaring. "You insolent brat! I am the senior master officially assigned to the curriculum coordination. Do you honestly believe your minor achievements qualify you to override my authority?" Sabagan scoffed. "Authority? A master without real baseline efficacy is just a logistical bottleneck. All you possess is a fragile ego and a birth certificate. You're nothing but a tired old fossil. For the structural benefit of the younger generation, why don't you step aside and let competent masters run the syllabus?" Boo-joon turned beet red, looking at Sung-yoon. "Deputy Director, are you going to permit this blatant insubordination in your chambers? Shut this arrogant up. This is an absolute disgrace to the faculty. I spent my entire life believing a martial artist's value was verified by raw combat efficacy," Sabagan mused, drawing a simple wooden training stick. "But I see the senior faculty prefers hiding behind administrative paperwork. Step outside into the courtyard with me, old man. Let's see if your sword style can match your mouth." By publicly dismantling Boo-joon, Sung-yoon's administrative standing will take an absolute hit. Sabagan can then seize total control of the tournament delegation without bureaucratic interference. The tournament is hosted at the White Martial Academy down in Jiangxi. The travel time from the Dragon Spring Academy to the Jiangxi deployment will take roughly a month. By making a slight tactical detour from the standard route, he can march his unit directly through the precise coordinates where Number 1 detected the active terraforming zone. While a solo investigation would be faster, his goals are broader. If Sung-yoon continues to obstruct him even after Boo-joon is crushed, Sabagan will drop the absolute proof of administrative corruption he has archived. Suddenly, his mana senses flare, and intense, heavy pressure blankets the room. A commanding voice echoes through the hall, telling them to cease their squabbling. Sabagan turns his attention toward the entrance as an ancient figure steps into the chamber. It has been an extensive period since this master last showed himself, and he seems highly amused by the dispute. The surrounding instructors watched in absolute terror as the raw, suffocating pressure of Sabagan's presence completely filled the corridor. A true martial master required this level of absolute, unyielding martial intent. The rumors hadn't done him justice. The talentless assistant instructor had truly transformed into an apex predator. The interloper is the Academy's senior-most authority and acting master, the Shadow Divine Swordsman, Pil-ji. Sung-yoon nervously asks what brings the master out of seclusion. Pil-ji scoffs, asking if there is a single corner of this campus barred from his sight. In reality, his sudden appearance is highly irregular. The elder is a pure martial fanatic who holds zero interest in standard instruction, entirely consumed by his personal sword path. Yet Sabagan calculates one absolute fact. Of all the combatants he has measured since his regression, this old man standing before him is by far the most powerful. Pil-ji claims he merely stepped out for fresh air, but decided to personally investigate the fascinating rumors rippling through the corridors. He notes they were debating the selection process for the tournament. Turning to Sabigan, he directly asks if the instructor truly intends to lead the delegation. Sabigan confirms it absolutely, reiterating his demand to personally select and field the entire roster. Pilji grins at his absolute audacity, noting he is claiming his non-traditional unit can outperform the Academy's established elite. Sung-yoon cuts in, arguing that a fresh instructor with barely 2 months of tenure demanding total control over an official alliance summit is a bureaucratic impossibility. Pilji silences the administrator, stating that Sabigan's philosophy regarding raw results carries real weight. Clapping his hands, the acting master issues an absolute decree they will hold an open, public martial competition to settle the roster. The pre-selected elite lineup will settle this through an official interclass exhibition match. Sung-yoon intervened with a cold sneer. Your newly formed unit will clash directly against Bujun's elite team to verify your pedagogical efficacy. Doesn't that sound fair, Instructor Sabigan? I trust your hand-picked outcasts possess the talent to represent you? Returning to his classroom, Sabigan briefs his unit, leaving them thoroughly shocked. They find themselves thrown directly into an internal trial against the school's absolute best. The cadets complain that he committed them to a massive tournament without any prior consultation, but Sabigan dismisses their ungrateful muttering. Just then, Su Yang enters the room. She notes this isn't his first time altering logistics without her input, demanding an absolute explanation for targeting the Heavenly Martial Tournament. Sabigan states his motive is simple: to force his cadets out of this stagnant, low-quality educational environment and expose them to the true martial world. He cuts off the discussion. Eliminating substandard education metrics is my primary objective, Sabigan countered smoothly. Finalize the brackets. Bujun smirked, writing down the names. We will break your arrogance on stage. First match, your prize student, Harian of the Special Purpose class, will face my top baseline seed. His opponent is Cho-hyun from the Ferocious Tiger class. Harian looks incredibly grim, admitting he knows him well from his previous track. He had challenged Cho-hyun multiple times in the past and was absolutely crushed on every single occasion. Sabigan remains entirely indifferent, telling him to focus on winning rather than past data. The next match sets Muntan against Danhwa from the elite Flying Dragon class. The room gasps, they recognize her name instantly. Anhwa is the renowned prodigy of the Mok clan, a monolithic family whose sword style rivals the absolute highest lineages in the land. Muntan remembers her clearly as the elite candidate who arrogantly rejected joining their special unit during the initial enrollment drive. Soso notes that since Danhwa is a personal acquaintance, they might maintain decorum. Moving down the list, Soso herself is paired against Han Ging from the second-year Ferocious Tiger class. He is the heir to a prominent escort agency and a direct relative of Instructor Bujun. Sabigan instantly logs him as administrative trash. The next bracket sets Wujong against Bikjong, a third-year powerhouse from the Flying Dragon class. The cadets react with absolute dread, explaining that Bikjong is widely recognized as the top student across the entire third-year tier. He also happens to hold the title of vice leader within the Lotus Sword Hall, a prominent institution managed directly by a branch of the destructive Sword clan. Their synergy is flawless. Your boy stands zero chance. Bujun laughed wheezily. And for our main event, we will match your favorite failure, Lee Jun. His opponent is Bak Ok, a former classmate from his time in the Camellia sector. Lee Jun turns pale. This is the exact bully who used to torment him and was previously disciplined. Reports indicate Bak Ok explicitly pressured the board to secure this exact matchup, leaving Lee Jun terrified of an absolute public humiliation. Returning to his training hall, Sabigan looked at his anxious students. Do not let their administrative boasting shake your core focus. You think I would enter a tournament simply to watch you fail? Remember, no pain, no gain. We have exactly 7 days before the exhibition. Prepare yourselves because this week will be absolute hell. Ignoring their desperate protests, he instantly triples the volume and intensity of their core drills, initiating an absolute Hell Week regime. Su Yang steps forward, asking Sabigan who will oversee the advanced tactical instruction for the group. Sabigan smirks, announcing they will be personally supervised by their highly capable, beautiful inspector. Su Yang looks at him in absolute disbelief. He explains he will be focusing on his independent progress, leaving Wuzhong to his specialized forms. Turning to the prodigy, Sabigan asks if he requires any custom pointers, but the young man silently shakes his head. Delivering a clean strike that knocks him flat onto the ground, Muntan figures that's his cue to stay down and wrap things up cleanly, but a brief memory flashes in his mind of himself telling Harian to stop, warning him that the technique wasn't normal. He had wondered why his friend was trying so hard when he could have easily swallowed his pride and thrown the fight to avoid pain. He's the one who defeated Wuzhong before, remember? He immediately turns around and tells the inspector to keep an eye on those brats while they do their drills. She wants to know where he's going in the middle of class, but he needs to step out for a moment. If anyone asks, he wants her to make up an excuse. She tells him to wait, but he just walks off. That bastard, when he asked her to stick around, it was just so he could dump his responsibilities on her. Meanwhile, the boy is still training hard, reminding himself not to let anything shake him. He's supposedly the only one who beat Wuzhong before, but he knows that's not the whole truth. Now he realizes it. The only reason he managed to defeat Wuzhong back then was because the instructor broke down the exact trajectory of the sword for him to study before the duel. If they were to fight again, there is no way he could beat Wuzhong, no matter how hard he tried, even though his internal energy has definitely improved compared to before, but his progress is already slowing down, and in just a week, he will have to face this person in front of everyone. He thinks that's the only way to defeat him, though he's uncertain. Just then, he senses something strange. He doesn't know who is making so much noise, but looking over, he spies Bok OK in the middle of training. He quickly hides and covers his mouth. He can't believe the guy is out here so late. Suddenly, Bok OK spots him and shouts, mistaking his intentions. Perhaps the intense cultivation is playing tricks on the bully's head, as Bok OK confronts him, demanding to know why this little bastard is spying on him, and acting like he's done something impressive, like a rat secretly spying on someone else's routine. This is the Camellia class freshman from the Dragon Spring Academy, the eldest son of the Tiger Dragon Escort Agency of Hunan, Bok OK. The boy doesn't know why the bully is here so late at night, but stammers asking if he's not allowed to train or something. Bok OK scoffs back when they were in the same class. The kid never even bothered to practice. Now this foolish brat dares to talk back to him, clearly getting too comfortable while he was away. The kid cowers, expecting a blow, but Bok OK simply lowers his fist. Beating him senseless right now won't achieve anything anyway. He tells the kid to get lost, warning him that he's going to tear him to pieces in front of everyone this week, before walking away. The boy sighs, feeling a wave of relief, but he chides himself for being relieved just because Bok OK didn't beat him up on the spot. He knows this mindset won't do. Meanwhile, the other boys are also pushing themselves through training. He's taking a brutal beating from another swordsman. What a joke. His opponent had actually wondered if the boy was some kind of hidden martial master when he recklessly issued the challenge. For a split second, he thought that might be the case, but this is pathetic. He doesn't know what's wrong with the kid, who looked ready to kill just a moment ago. Yet, looking at the current scene, something is clearly off. He glares at Harrion, scoffing at his pathetic skills and wondering what the hell he was thinking when he challenged him. But why did he do it? Because his family was insulted, driving him into a blind rage. Well, what can he do about it anyway? Everything said about him and his family was true. Each and every one of them is an idiot. Furious and losing control, Harrion unleashes a flurry of strikes with his sword. His opponent counters, telling him he should have stayed in his place and kept his mouth shut if he didn't want to end up like this, calling him a disgrace to the orthodox sects. Suddenly, Harrion snaps out of it as his companion asks him what happened, wondering if he doesn't remember. He collapsed from sheer exhaustion in the middle of training. He pushed himself way too far. So that's what happened. What kind of madness is this? Both of them are completely spent, and they have to endure this grueling routine for 6 more days. Now that they think about it, where the hell is Sabigan? He left them with this absurd training, and right then a wooden staff smacks him square in the face. Here he is, standing before his miserable disciple. From what he can see, the boy at least finished all the repetitions assigned to him. Strictly speaking, he should be severely punished for deceiving his master and bringing dishonor to his sect. But since he worked hard, he'll let it slide. The boy mutters about what nonsense deceiving the master is, only to get smacked again. He really did gain a lot of strength after that beating. The boy asks where he's been, mentioning that the inspector has been looking for him all day. The instructor scoffs, asking if they truly thought he was just out idling. Even he has critical matters to attend to. At any rate, he wants him to begin his one-on-one lessons immediately to prepare for the public martial duel. The boy protests, pointing out that they already trained past midnight under this ridiculous regimen and now there's more. The instructor replies that of course there is more. Did he think basic conditioning alone would allow him to defeat all those opponents? Obviously, that's impossible, regardless of what they do in a single week. Given their average skills, how could they possibly defeat prodigies like Chohan and Danhwa? The boy demands a straight answer, asking if completing this training guarantees they can actually beat them. The instructor answers honestly, no, he won't lie. No matter what they do in a week, their chances of winning remain slim. They already knew that. So what the hell is the point of this training then? The instructor explains that if they can endure everything he throws at them, they will at least avoid a humiliating defeat in front of the entire academy. That's hardly motivating. It just sounds like a cruel semantic game. The student is completely fed up. He no longer cares about the celestial martial tournament and tells the instructor to expel him from the class or beat him as much as he likes. Our protagonist's gaze darkens. He feels an urge to put this arrogant brat in his place. Inside his mind, a demonic presence urges him on, saying he only needs to give the word to eliminate the boy instantly. But Harian speaks up, recalling the statement about not losing humiliatingly. If he endures 6 days of training, he wants to at least be able to fight Chohin properly. The instructor looks at Harian, admitting he expected him to be the first to quit, given the lethal pace. But unlike Muntan, Harian has a driving force. He needs to exact revenge on that bastard Shohan, no matter the consequences, asking if the instructor is going to give him a self-righteous lecture about refusing to train someone driven by a dark motive. Our protagonist smiles inwardly, far from being displeased. He considers this a perfect answer, full marks. Meanwhile, we turn to the prodigy who is going through his forms, wondering why the celestial martial tournament suddenly matters so much to young Master Wuzhong. Did he really come all the way to this rundown yard just to discuss this? The speaker is Bikjong, a third-year student of the Flying Dragon class at the Dragon Spring Academy, and the vice secretary of the Lotus Sword Hall, Bikjong, though it's simpler to regard him as a senior peer. It has been quite a while since they last met face-to-face. Bikjong asks how he has been keeping, but Wuzhong cuts him off, telling him to skip the superficial pleasantries, pointing out they were never close enough to exchange greetings. Enough of that. What exactly are you playing at, causing a scene out of nowhere by claiming you want to enter the Celestial Martial Tournament now? Wuzhong replies that there's a misunderstanding. The decision wasn't his, but something his instructor arranged unilaterally. Bikjong sneers at the flimsy excuse, asking if that's the best he can come up with and demanding honesty and telling him to just admit that he resented losing his spot and let greed get the better of him because he couldn't stand someone else occupying the highest seat. The young master of the destructive sword style sighs, noting that Bikjong's habit of jumping to conclusions hasn't changed a bit. He tells him to believe whatever he likes as he turns to leave right now. Bikjong draws his blade and presses it against his neck, warning Wuzhong not to play dumb. The only reason he tolerated his insolence until now was out of respect for the main clan, not because he was the weaker combatant. However, since Wuzhong is the one instigating things, the rules have changed. If he thought his dignity would be spared in a public martial duel, he has made a grave miscalculation. Bikjong claims he was taken lightly just because he belongs to a branch clan, asking what the true purpose of training martial arts at this academy is. Why else, if not to show the world an underlying truth hidden from ordinary people, that his clan's ever-evolving, relentless swordsmanship is superior to the destructive sword style, which is weighed down by noble lineage and dulled by prolonged peace. Wuzhong remarks that they can agree on at least one thing. Bikjong looks confused, but Wuzhong tells him to allow him to add a final piece of advice. Never recklessly unsheath or brandish a sword unless you genuinely intend to cut. Doing so only tarnish your clan's honor. With that, he continues walking away. Bikjong grumbles that they will settle this at the public martial duel, bidding him a harsh farewell. Furious, he stabs his sword into the ground, unable to comprehend why that insolent brat speaks with such absolute confidence. We return to the young student, those mocking threats echoing in his head about how he'll be utterly crushed this week. As the days tick away, he practices diligently, realizing that Bak Ok is taking this public martial duel completely seriously. Compared to that fierce dedication, he feels like he's making no progress at all. Then he notices his classmate training nearby. Harian is emitting an incredibly intense aura, looking vastly different from yesterday. Immediately, Muntan tells the observer not to get distracted. The boy asks Muntan what he's doing here, and Muntan replies that, as anyone can plainly see, he's just taking a quick breather from this absurd special training. He's in no position to judge, but he wonders if this is wise, asking what will happen if Instructor Sabigan catches him idling. Muntan replies that the man won't be showing up today. From what he gathered, the instructor spent the entire night teaching Harian a bizarre cultivation method before vanishing into the academy grounds again. The boy notes bitterly that the instructor spent the night helping Harian, completely ignoring him. Muntan explains that Harian was pushed to total exhaustion and went straight to sleep. The boy wonders why the instructor won't grant him some kind of specialized training too, feeling frustrated. He was told to merely focus on circulating his energy because there was supposedly nothing else to teach him. Yet the man stayed up all night for Harian. So in his case, he's just supposed to run basic energy circulation for 6 consecutive days and then fight Bak Ok in front of all the cadets. This is never going to work for him. Meanwhile, the inspector is wrapping up her own session with other students. She thanks the assistant for her dedication, noting they've worked well into the late hours. She tells her to go get some rest. That's Sabigan. The man hasn't shown his face even once. Consequently, she has been handling the classes all day long again. Even so, she reflects on how long it's been since she enjoyed such peace. Being an instructor, a path she never envisioned, isn't so bad. She realizes she hasn't checked on the special class recently because she was occupied with So-So. She wonders how the other cadets are faring. Walking over, she spots one practicing his sword forms. Seeing the inspector, the student stops and asks if something is wrong, mentioning he thought he was supposed to stick strictly to energy circulation training until the day of the martial duel. But he explains that last night, Instructor Sabigan explicitly instructed him to begin practicing sword techniques starting today. She can't believe it. That man just appears out of thin air and vanishes without a trace, leaving the students to push their limits late into the night. The boy nods in affirmation to the inspector. Night falls, and we see the student deeply lost in thought, executing a relentless sequence of strikes. With a final concentrated effort, the pressure from his blade snaps a nearby tree. Our protagonist steps out of the shadows, noting he's finally finished. He asks if there are any tangible results, but the student shakes his head, admitting he still has a long way to go. Though he confidently adds that even now, there is no way he would lose to an opposing cadet. Our protagonist smirks at the brat's cockiness, stating he wants to see firsthand exactly what they've managed to achieve this week. It's time to find out which of them spent these past 7 days in the deepest desperation. Returning to the special class, one student is fast asleep, while Harrion continues to hone his aura, growing visually more formidable by the hour. Revenge against Shohun, for his upcoming opponent in the martial duel to be the exact target of his vengeance, is an incredible coincidence. Intrigued, the instructor tells him he wants to hear the whole story, asking where it all began. It started when they were assigned to the same cadet group. They weren't enemies initially. Chohun was the prestigious heir to one of the most prominent clans in Honam, while Harrion came from a small, insignificant martial family. He had no desire to cross paths with him, but unfortunately, that bastard eventually singled him out. He confronted him publicly, mocking the hidden history of Harrien's nameless clan, calling him a hypocritical bastard of the orthodox faction. He jeered, wondering how a low-born insect managed to gain admission to the Dragon Spring Academy. Instantly, the surrounding cadets began whispering and casting judgmental looks. It was true that his father had once been an unorthodox martial artist, but he had long since abandoned that path and, with the official sanction of the Orthodox Alliance, embraced righteousness well before Harrion was born. But when Harrion tried to explain, Chohyun slapped him across the face, telling him to watch his mouth and asking how a filthy stray dared talk back to him, calling his father a traitor who abandoned his own faction to grovel at the feet of the Orthodox Alliance, and even had the nerve to sire a son. He spat that both father and son made his stomach turn. Harrion immediately drew his sword to attack. But what infuriated him most was that the bastard's overwhelming skills perfectly matched his arrogant boasting. Following his embarrassing defeat that first night, Harrion challenged him repeatedly, but not once could he land a single blow or touch a hair on his head. Then, out of nowhere, his entire group was abruptly reassigned to this exact location, the Special Purpose class. The instructor listens, asking if that is the entirety of his grievance. Harrion confirms it is. The instructor asks if Chohun ever sent assassins after him or snuck into his quarters at night to slit his throat. When Harrion says no, our protagonist smacks him on the head. He notes that given the burning fury in Harrion's eyes, he expected an actual blood feud, not a petty childhood grudge. Disappointed, he tells him to get back to drilling his fundamentals. Harrion fires back, saying it might sound trivial to him, but he will never forgive that bastard, especially for insulting his parents. How could he just sit back? He grits his teeth, stating that neither the instructor nor Chohyun has any idea how much agony his father endured to leave the unorthodox path. He vows that no matter what it takes, one day he will bring that bastard down with his own hands. Hearing this, our protagonist's interest is piqued. He steps closer, noting that a willingness to do absolutely anything is exactly the kind of resolve he was looking for. Our protagonist flashes a terrifying smile, though the backstory was rather anticlimactic. That fierce spirit is highly commendable. Unlike Lee Jun, who wallowed in despondency after his defeat, Harrion hasn't succumbed to self-pity, which pleases him. Recognizing his drive, the instructor decides to assist him, manifesting a strange sphere of compressed energy. He mentions he had planned to give him this later, but he will integrate it into his body right now, specifically into his middle energy core. The boy doesn't understand what that implies, but the instructor notes that a technical explanation would be beyond him anyway. He simply needs to know that this energy is fundamentally different from standard internal martial arts chi. Because of its foreign nature, it will violently resist and attempt to fracture his focus rather than merging smoothly. His sole task until the day of the duel is to utilize the inner cultivation method he was taught to suppress and master this foreign energy. One thing is guaranteed: if he succeeds, he will become incomparably stronger than he is now. Harien asks what happens if he fails. Our protagonist casually remarks that his energy lines might rupture, causing his head to burst, before chuckling and adding that he's merely joking, though he warns that if it goes wrong, the physical agony will be so severe that he'll beg for death on the spot. He asks if he's still willing to go through with it. Ultimately, that's how the grueling process began. He spent 18 hours every single day focused entirely on subduing and absorbing that foreign energy, and before he knew it, 5 days had flown by. In the beginning, it felt as though his chest were being ripped apart by an excruciating burning sensation, but by grit and endless cycles of the cultivation method, he finally managed to stabilize it. He succeeded. Yet, he reflects that he doesn't feel drastically different from before, and the eccentric instructor who gave him this power hasn't shown up in days, wondering where the hell he went off to. Hoping he wasn't just handed a dangerous fraud, cut to our protagonist, who has just shattered another testing crystal. With his current output, he is far better prepared. The following morning, the venue is packed as the public placement matches for the Celestial Martial Tournament are officially declared open. The spectators are buzzing with excitement over this unusual selection method, whispering about the so-called special purpose class and hoping to see an actual spectacle. Still, the outcome is anyone's guess. Some recall when Li Jun managed to upset Wu Zhong in the past, and note that Wu Zhong is also competing under this special class roster. A senior cadet scoffs, saying that even if Wu Zhong is a prodigy, he can't compare to Bic Zhong just yet. He points out the stellar lineup of established candidates: Dan Hua of the Malk Sword Flash Clan, Cho Hyun of the Celestial Tiger Martial Academy, and Bok Ok of the Tiger Dragon Escort Agency. Every single one of them comes from an elite lineage. No matter how hard an ordinary person struggles, they can never breach the wall of innate talent. Sung Yoon sits in the pavilion, highly pleased with himself, confident that the top-tier academy talents he selected could never lose to a bunch of common commoners. Our protagonist walks up and greets him, noting how absolutely certain he seems of victory. Sung Yoon grits his teeth in irritation, unable to tolerate the instructor's smug proximity. He sneers, mentioning he heard the special class was subjected to a brutal training regime all week, mocking the idea that those useless kids could amount to anything. Our protagonist replies that it was merely the baseline effort required, adding that they aren't useless, just neglected. Seong Yoon scoffs, claiming that thanks to a foolish instructor, the cadets endured meaningless hardships only to be publicly humiliated. It's clear he still holds a bitter grudge from their last encounter. Clinging desperately to past slights, our protagonist notices the weapon Sung Yoon is holding and asks about it. Sung Yoon boasts that at least the rookie has an eye for quality. He brags that this custom masterpiece, named the Violet Dawn Sword, was forged specifically for him to display alongside his students at the tournament. He proudly reveals he commissioned it from the finest blacksmith in the region for a hefty sum of 200 silver taels, claiming it can slice through solid stone with ease without bending a single millimeter. Its craftsmanship is peerless, a true work of art. Our protagonist takes a closer look, stripping away the unnecessarily gaudy and flashy decorations. The blade core itself is actually quite decent. The profile and weight distribution closely mirror the standard issue swords he used back during his days as a demon army commander. Of course, it's just a coincidence, as he can adapt to any weapon. Sung Yoon smirks, suggesting they add some stakes to the afternoon by placing a bet on the overall outcome of the duels, since both are completely confident in their respective students. He points out they never truly settled their previous dispute, proposing that the loser must unconditionally grant whatever request the winner makes, with no refusals allowed. Our protagonist repeats the terms, acting as if he's contemplating it, reminding Sung Yoon that he was the one who arbitrarily drew up the match list a week ago. He adds that since this entire selection match was forced by the deputy director's stubbornness, it's only fair the original roster faces a proper trial. Our protagonist accepts the wager, much to Sung Yoon's delight, who expected him to hesitate. Assuming the young instructor has something he desperately wants to plead for, Sung Yoon laughs internally at how pathetic his opponent is. However, the moment the weapon was displayed, our protagonist's gaze had locked onto it. He fully intends to claim that Violet Dawn's sword for himself. Sung Yoon states his term clearly. If his side wins, Sabagan must voluntarily resign from his position as an instructor. This will dissolve the eyesore that is the special purpose class, restore Wu Zhong to his proper place, and ensure a upstart rookie never challenges his authority again. The terms are locked in, and neither man can back out. Right on cue, Pilji steps onto the center platform. He announces that as previously scheduled, today's trials will determine which cadets represent the Academy at the prestigious Celestial Martial Tournament. While candidates were historically chosen by administrative appointment, a bold young instructor challenged the status quo, and management agreed to the trial. Therefore, the original candidates must now defend their spots against the challengers from the special class. The selection will be decided by a best-of-5 series of one-on-one matches. Victory is achieved via surrender or loss of consciousness. He warned sternly that any deliberate attempt to maim or kill will result in immediate disqualification. With that, the first match is called, and the combatants take the stage. Representing the challengers is first-year Special Class Cadet Harian, facing the original candidate, first-year Flying Dragon Class Cadet Chohun. Watching from the sidelines, Harian's friend notes that the opponent looks completely unbothered. Chohun sneers, addressing Harian as a half-breed stray, mocking the rumors that he spent the whole week training like a maniac. He scoffs, asking if Harian honestly believes hard work can bridge the gap between them, telling him scum should know its place. Chohun brags he's lost count of how many times he's thrashed him, but Harian answers quietly that he remembers perfectly. It has been exactly 8 times. Chohun lunges forward, unleashing a heavy strike, but Harian fluidly evades and counters with a swift strike right across Chohun's face. The spectators gasp in disbelief. It seemed impossible for Harian to land a hit. Chohun recoils, laughing maniacally in sheer disbelief. In the pavilion, Seung-yoon smirks, completely unfazed, noting that the outcome of this particular matchup was obvious from the start. Since the two have clashed repeatedly, and Chohyun won decisively every single time. He reasons that with such a historical gap, the disparity should have only widened. Seung-yoon prides himself on having engineered a match list that pairs the special class against their absolute worst matchups. To him, this displays the strategic depth of a true senior instructor, an attribute a raw upstart completely lacks. He gloats that while this would normally just be a simple loss for the students, the rookie instructor's foolish wager has ensured his own professional ruin. Blinded by short-sighted greed, he staked his career on these hopeless kids. Our protagonist merely chuckles at the lecture, quietly murmuring, "A wager?" Down on the platform, Harian lands another thunderous strike, completely disorienting his opponent. Our protagonist watches serenely, knowing this isn't a gamble, it's a calculated, pre-engineered outcome. Chohyun stumbles backward, completely shocked by the impact, before crashing heavily onto the floor, filled with rage at being struck by someone he considers a filthy outcast. He curses Harian, but Harian just stands there with a chilling, vengeful smile. Moving with incredible speed, Harian presses the advantage and lands another heavy blow. Chohyun screams in fury, demanding how a low-born stray dares to look down on him, and unleashes a frantic barrage of sword strikes. He finally manages to connect, but Harian absorbs the hit and counters mercilessly, leaving his friend watching in terror. A senior student murmurs that Chohyun must have simply dropped his guard, and that the core dynamic hasn't changed, but Gukjung scoffingly replies that claiming it's just carelessness is ridiculous. He points out that Chohyun was famously meticulous in his prior matches, constantly boasting to everyone that he never allowed a single clean strike to land on him. He never tolerated failure. Despite his rotten and arrogant personality, Chohyun remains an undisputed prodigy born into a legendary martial lineage. Gukjong asks if anyone honestly believes such a fighter would give away clean hits out of pure laziness to an opponent he has thoroughly studied 8 times before. He notes it can only mean one thing. Harian has undergone a fundamental transformation. The Celestial Tiger Martial Academy is one of the oldest, most elite institutions in Honam, boasting over 100 elite disciples, and Chohyun is the sole heir to its grandmaster. He is the region's most celebrated prodigy, having mastered every advanced technique the academy offers. Nurtured on priceless medicinal elixirs and sacred tonics since childhood, a genius among geniuses. Driven by sheer humiliation, Chohyun unleashes his core style, the heavenly moonlight radiant sword art, combining it with the erratic footwork of the 18 unbridled cloud steps. He assaults Harian without mercy, desperate to rip him apart in his deep frustration. Regardless of any initial mistakes, he cannot tolerate being visibly wounded in a formal arena. Vowing to pour every ounce of his cultivation into the fight, he resolves to crush this nonentity so thoroughly he won't even have room to draw breath. Executing the devastating Rising Radiant Dragon Slash, he sends Harrian crashing heavily into the dirt. Cho Hyun pants heavily, having exhausted a massive amount of internal energy on that sequence. Believing the match is over, he scoffs at the waste of time. But Harrian steadily pushes himself back up, asking if that's truly the best the young master can do, mocking him by asking who the one rolling on the floor like a dog really is. He declares that they are far from finished, leaving Cho Hyun completely stunned. That was his absolute maximum output, a direct hit. Yet the boy stands up as if it were nothing. Harrian tells him that if he won't step forward, then he will take the initiative, launching himself into a ferocious charge. Cho Hyun snaps, calling him a dull-witted fool who merely optimized for raw physical endurance, desperate to put him back in his place. But as Cho Hyun strikes, Harrian casually deflects it, mocking him by asking if the prodigy's blows have grown soft before pressing his own attack. Cho Hyun finds himself completely overwhelmed. Harrian's sword trajectories are entirely different from his old style. Spectators watch in awe as Harrian seems to grow more energetic and focused with every minor injury he sustains, accumulating an alarming amount of momentum. Fighting like a man possessed, striking relentlessly, no one can fathom what transpired in the special class over the past week, and Sung Yoon is losing his mind, screaming from the sidelines for Cho Hyun to pull himself together. In contrast, our protagonist watches with absolute satisfaction. Harrian has fully adapted to the refinement, performing significantly better than anticipated. During his past life as a demon army commander, upon unlocking the secrets of time regression, he had meticulously formulated blueprints to combat the demonic hordes following his return. To maximize efficiency in exterminating them, he spent decades researching and designing thousands of tailored anti-demon tactical systems, though many had to be shelved due to immediate resource constraints. The method he used on Harrian was one such experimental project, forcibly injecting inverted mana into a native martial artist's pathways to trigger a forced awakening, demanding the biological system adapt to the strain. In essence, it is a highly diluted version of the modification experiments he himself endured under the Demon Lords. Of course, compared to those horrific trials, this is an exceptionally faint trace of mana. Nonetheless, mana remains an energy source native to an entirely different dimension. No matter how thoroughly it is refined, the physical toll can never be entirely neutralized. Even he had suffered severe internal agony for days when reconstructing his pathways after his regression. Harrian possesses a manic determination. He endured the torturous integration process perfectly, binding the foreign power directly to his middle energy core. The real-time results speak for themselves. His raw power, neurological reflexes, and cardiovascular capacity have skyrocketed. Chohan grows increasingly frantic as Harrian's middle core expands rapidly, elevating his endurance, physical threshold, and recovery to superhuman levels. Driven to desperation, Chohan screams and unleashes the hidden seventh form of the thundercloud chase. But for a prodigy who has always dominated his peers through raw, uncontested capability, facing an opponent who simply refuses to fall is a living nightmare. Harrian casually catches his wrist, locking him in place, and delivers a devastating straight punch to his torso that sends him flying across the ring, heavily bruised and coughing. Harrian taunts him, asking if this is truly the absolute limit of the Celestial Tiger Martial Academy's grand heir. Chohan curses, telling him to shut his mouth, completely losing his composure. Shouting that if this were a battle with live steel, Harrian would have been dead long ago. Harrian picks up his dropped training blade, steps over him, and asks why the person on the ground is the one making excuses. He brings the sword down in a swift arc, stopping it a mere millimeter from Cho Hyun's throat. The referee calls the match. It is over. The winner of the opening match is declared as Harrian of the Special Purpose class. The arena falls into an incredulous silence. No one can comprehend what they just witnessed. A historical loser managed to completely dominate an elite opponent who had thrashed him 8 times before. Harrian himself looks at his hands, tears streaming down his face as the reality sinks in, before raising his sword and roaring in triumph. He gestures defiantly at the crowd of senior students who used to mock him behind his back. However, the sudden strain catches up to him. He heavily coughs up blood and collapses to the floor. The medics rush out, concerned. Shortly after, in the recovery area, our protagonist manually stabilizes the boy's internal pathways. He notes he has successfully managed to suppress the volatile roiling within the boy's middle core, warning him that absolute rest is mandatory. He is strictly forbidden from using internal energy for at least 48 hours. Harrian nods weakly. Mun-tan, standing nearby, mentions he noticed Harrian looked like he was in absolute agony during the final exchange, asking the instructor if he actually went and taught his friend some forbidden demonic art. Harrian cuts him off, telling Mun-tan that he knew exactly what he was signing up for. He knew that drawing upon that deep reservoir of foreign energy would carry a massive physical toll, having accepted the technique with full awareness of the risks, telling him to drop it. Mun-tan throws his hands up, telling him not to come crying if his core permanently ruptures. Our protagonist observes them, noting it's heartwarming to see him look out for his classmate, though he adds that Mun-tan has far more pressing personal matters to worry about. He reminds him that he's up next, mocking how cool he tried to act by constantly skipping his assignments. Mun-tan insists he has everything completely under control, revealing his actual strategy. The moment the match begins, he intends to immediately surrender. He reasons there's no point in getting needlessly thrashed in a hopeless matchup. Following the special class's stunning initial upset, the referee calls for the second bout of the selection trial. Matching the special class's Mun-tan against the prize genius of the Flying Dragon class, freshman Anhwa. The crowd erupts into cheers for the legendary prodigy. Mun-tan stands across from her, unmoving and silent, needing no flashy introduction to understand the absolute disparity in their standings. Even so, her sheer martial presence feels incredibly sharp and suffocating against his skin. There isn't a single discernible opening in her stance. It's frustrating that a fellow freshman can possess such an overwhelming gap in ability, but for an ordinary guy devoid of prestigious lineage or natural genius, swift adaptation is the only means of survival. He thinks it might look a bit too pathetic to forfeit right at the opening bell. He decides to at least put on a brief show for Harrian's sake to save face. However, glancing at the deeply gouged cracks on the platform from the previous fight, an odd sensation washes over him. The referee signals the start, and in a flash, she appears right beside him. He's happy that should happen, but at that moment we remember him telling his friend that he should stop. That's not a normal internal energy technique, because he's trying so hard, he could have swallowed his pride again like before. But Harrian had snapped back, stating he refused to act like a natural-born loser. He noted that while outsiders think losing 8 times means another defeat shouldn't matter, it actually makes the sting worse. He told him never to claim someone as just meant to fail, declaring his absolute hatred for losing. Inspired by that memory, Mun-tan pushes himself back up to his feet, muttering that his stubborn friend forced him into doing something completely out of character. He draws his specialized weapons, preparing to give his opponent a real challenge as he assumes a combat stance. The crowd murmurs in surprise as he uncovers a set of unique implements, blades far too short to be standard swords, fitted with peculiar iron rings at the pommels. Anhwa wonders why he kept these hidden until now, though she coolly notes it makes no difference, inviting him to give it everything he has before she defeats him. Accepting the challenge, Mun-tan closes the distance rapidly to initiate a clash. He unleashes a complex flurry of short-range strikes, but she parries each one flawlessly, prompting him to break away into a high-speed sprint around her. Leaping from an angle, he drives down with absolute ferocity, unleashing a tempest of kinetic energy. Yet Anhwa remains completely unbothered, her posture immaculate as she deflects the brunt of the assault. Mun-tan realized as much, finding a genuine gap in the Mo clan's defensive arts is nearly impossible. Suddenly she counterattacks, and though he believes he has successfully slipped the trajectory, sheer force of her chi clips him, sending him crashing backward across the ring. Coughing from the impact, he struggles to his knees. Anhwa asks if that's the limit of his unique weaponry, suggesting that if this is all he has to offer, he should save himself further injury and yield. Mun-tan just laughs, asking what else she expected from a completely average martial artist like him. But with a subtle flick of his wrist, he reveals a hidden variable tied to his discarded short blades, a set of razor-sharp silver threads. No one noticed when he laid the trap, but he instantly manipulates the strings to orchestrate an intricate multi-directional web of steel around her. Anhwa, maintaining her cool composure, releases a burst of concentrated sword chi, slicing through the web and cleanly concluding the duel. Mun-tan raises his hand, formally yielding as he steps out of the bounds. The referee calls the match for Anhwa. He knows he fought a losing battle from the start, but he pushed his kit to its absolute limits. To his absolute surprise, the audience erupts into applause, cheering for his clever tactics and resilience. Harrian approaches him from behind, reminding him that he had promised to forfeit the second the match started, asking why he went all out instead. Mun-tan grumbles and tells him to shut up, muttering about exactly whose fault it was that he got worked up in the first place. The two friends head back to the benches, chuckling over the unexpected turn of events. In a secluded corridor behind the pavilion, Sung-yoon is aggressively lecturing his next fighter, reminding him that under no circumstances can he lose, especially since Chohan was already defeated. The young man scoffs, telling his uncle to stop grouping him with those second-rate failures, insisting there is no way he would lose to some fragile girl whose only notable quality is her grandfather's surname. This is the second-year powerhouse from the Tiger class, Wang Yi, who happens to be the nephew of Instructor Buke. He drops his training weights heavily onto the floor, noting his opponent is a blue-haired girl who has never won a single official sparring match in her life. To him, a loss is utterly inconceivable. Meanwhile, the female inspector is checking in on the challenger in the waiting room, asking if she's mentally prepared for her bout. Seeing the girl look steady, she takes a moment to offer some guidance, gently inquiring if she's experiencing any stage fright, noting her demeanor is unusually quiet. So looks up and assures her she is completely fine. The inspector mentions she heard the widespread rumors about her historical losses, but counters that based on her personal observations, So's core energy circulation and kinetic foundation are actually superior to the vast majority of the student body. She asks why she kept such potential hidden. So simply replies that getting hit hurts too much. The inspector blinks, confused. So explains that since early childhood, she was subjected to brutal external martial arts training, forced to endure severe beatings every single morning and night by her grandfather from the age of 6 until her entire body was black and blue. As a result, she naturally grew to avoid physical confrontation whenever possible. The inspector asks why she never simply struck back to end it. So looks down, whispering that if she hits them back, then they will have to feel that awful pain too. The inspector is dumbfounded by the girl's bizarrely misplaced empathy, realizing she completely lacks the basic mindset of a competitive martial artist. She tells So she has a massive misunderstanding, urging her to listen very carefully to what she's about to reveal. Back at the arena, the third match is called. The imposing second-year brawler of the ferocious Tiger class, Wang Yi, steps forward to face the first-year special class challenger, So. Looking her over, Wang Yi smirks, identifying her as the fragile girl who can't even throw a punch, though he casually notes she has a pretty enough face. Amused by the matchup, resolving to immediately show her the absolute disparity in their levels, he lunges forward with a heavy opening strike. However, the instant his fist flies, So fluidly shifts her weight and evades the blow completely. Wang Yi blinks in surprise, noting her raw reaction speed is remarkably high. He throws another rapid punch, which she cleanly ducks while beginning to condense a massive amount of internal force within her fists. We flash back to her conversation with the inspector, who had informed her of a massive misunderstanding regarding her opponent, revealing that Wang Yi actually derives physical gratification from taking damage. So had gasped in shock. Wang Yi hails from a specific lineage in Shangxi, whose core style revolves around the golden qi cultivation technique, complemented by the wild tiger wind fist. The inspector explained that the practitioners of the Wang family undergo a highly unorthodox conditioning process designed to chemically and mentally convert physical impact into neurological pleasure, allowing them to minimize distress during prolonged combat, meaning the more skilled the opponent's strike, the deeper their satisfaction when absorbing it. So had found it hard to believe, wondering if it was a joke, but the inspector reminded her of her official standing within the Murim alliance to back up the claim. Taking the advice to heart, So fully channels her internal force and delivers a precise heavy strike straight to Wang Yi's torso, knocking the massive cadet clean off his feet. Our protagonist watches with interest as Wang Yi stumbles up, his face contorted in sheer rage. So blinks, slightly confused because he looks genuinely furious rather than pleased. Remembering the inspector's specific instructions for this scenario, she tilts her head and politely asks if her strike happened to cause him any pain. The inspector had told her that to verify it, she should land an initial blow and gauge the reaction. If the opponent complains, cries out, or demands a pause, then the theory is wrong. But if they immediately charge forward blindly without answering, it serves as definitive proof that they are thoroughly enjoying the physical toll. Wang Yi loses his mind upon hearing her question. Infuriated, he roars that he intended to drag the match out for amusement, but curses her for speaking so insolently without knowing her place. He charges like a mad bull, swearing to crush her smug face. So watches him run toward her, internalizing the inspector's advice since he's charging without answering. He must absolutely love getting hit. Thrilled by the prospect of helping him, she smiles brightly, ducks under his swing, and drives a devastating fist right into his diaphragm, shocking the entire audience. She unleashes a relentless, blinding combination of heavy external strikes. The crowd watches in absolute horror as she pummels the massive cadet, each hit perfectly demonstrating the peak efficiency of her grandfather's lineage, tossing him around like a rag doll. Senior instructors lean forward, stunned that a girl previously deemed a pacifist possesses such terrifying martial execution. They recognize her as the granddaughter of the legendary Iron Fist destroyer, Chol-ak. Sung-yoon watches in a silent, sweating panic, realizing her entire psychological barrier shattered the moment she entered the special class. An old grandmaster observing from the stands notes it was a fruitful choice to visit the academy today, seeing a girl who previously lacked an active core find her true calling. Our protagonist reflects that in the original timeline before his regression, So-so had remained completely obscure. Seeing her transform into an absolute powerhouse on the platform is a massive shift. He recalls noticing her conferring with Su Yang in the staging area earlier, amused by whatever advice triggered this behavioral shift. Regardless, it leaves Sung-yoon looking utterly defeated. The outcome completely exceeds his initial parameters. Originally, he had utilized this placement trial merely as an excuse to deploy Lee Jun and Woo Jong into active combat situations outside the academy walls, in order to track down indicators of demonic activity and give them practical battlefield exposure. Discovering that Harian and So-so possessed such staggering martial compatibility was an incredible bonus, meaning he will need to adjust his operational layout going forward. Down in the ring, Wang Yi finally gasps out a frantic surrender under the non-stop barrage, and the referee steps in to award So-so the clear victory. She beams with innocent happiness while the surrounding cadets stare at her in pure dread after that brutal display. The referee officially announces So-so of the special purpose class as the victor. So-so skips back to the sidelines, cheerfully thanking the inspector and confirming that her assessment was entirely accurate, exclaiming that the boy truly did seem to love every single impact. The inspector chuckles nervously, playing along by nodding that the world contains all sorts of eccentric martial lineages with highly specific training preferences. So-so looks slightly baffled, wondering if her instructor is pulling her leg, but she lets it go, still processing the strange advice. The inspector pats her on the shoulder, telling her she did an excellent job and should go take a well-deserved rest. Our protagonist walks over, observing that the two women seem to have developed a solid rapport. The inspector sighs, turning to him and demanding to know where the hell he has been, pointing out that managing his own students is technically his job. He casually replies he had external logistics to oversee, but notes her coaching method was fascinating. She tells him to drop the playing dumb act, mentioning she noticed the exceptional progress in Harian and Lee Jun, assuming he had calculated a clean sweep for his core roster. Our protagonist blinks, genuinely surprised, stating he hasn't given a single lesson to Lee Jun recently. We turn back to the preparation staging area, where the next combatant is donning his protective gear. Sung-yoon has marched straight into his nephew's tent, absolutely furious, berating him for displaying such immense overconfidence, only to let a girl turn him into a public punching bag. He demands to know if he intends to bring utter ruin to their family's reputation, shouting at him to open his mouth and explain himself, reminding him of the immense administrative strings pulled just to secure his entry into the grand event, the Celestial Martial Tournament, a joint exhibition pitting the absolute elite of the White Martial Academy, the Celestial Academy, and the Dragon Spring Academy against one another. Yet the underlying reality of the tournament's roster selection relies far less on raw martial merit and entirely on aristocratic financial backing. The presence of candidates like Baekjong of the Lotus Sword Hall, Danhwa of the Mock Sword Flash Clan, Chohan of the Celestial Tiger Martial Academy, and Bok Ok of the Tiger Dragon Escort Agency guarantees massive institutional endowments from their respective houses. That is the true baseline for selection, a thoroughly corrupt system. Sung-yoon fumes that his brother-in-law's clan had to beg on their knees for him to carve out an extra slot, only for his nephew to deliver this embarrassing performance. He warns that the general faculty is already highly unstable following the Sabagin controversy. If they drop these placement matches and alienate their primary corporate backers, his administrative faction could completely collapse. The referee's voice echoes, calling for the fourth match featuring Bok Ok of the Tiger Dragon Escort Agency. We see a flashback of Bok Ok swaggering into the instructor's office after hearing the special class was allowed to participate. Demanding to dictate his own pairing, he spoke with his signature coarse arrogance. When told to show proper respect to senior faculty, he simply shrugged, stating that if they wanted his family's continued financial backing, they would pair him directly against that weakling, Lee Jun. The administrator had snapped that the brackets were fixed and couldn't be altered on a whim, but Bok Ok confidently countered, promising that his father would double the agency's seasonal contribution as long as he got his hands on the kid. He wanted to be the one to personally break him. Remembering this, Sung-yoon mutters that he granted the pairing exactly as requested, warning that if his nephew fails to deliver after all these adjustments, there will be hell to pay. Back in the present, the tension is palpable. The special class unexpectedly leads the set 2-1. Sung Yoon watches sweating, desperate to stabilize the disaster. As the fourth round is called, Lee Jun steps onto the stage. Fully aware he is facing a physical juggernaut, it has been months since their last violent encounter, and the memories of past humiliations flash through his mind. Shaking them off, he forces himself to clear his thoughts, focusing entirely on gathering his internal chi. Bak Ok immediately explodes into a fierce sprint, throwing a heavy opening hook. Lee Jun manages to slip the first punch, but the follow-up strike comes instantly, forcing him to cross his blade in a frantic block. The raw, kinetic impact skates him clean across the platform, driving him away from the center. Bak Ok mocks him, asking where he's looking and jeering that avoiding a beating for a few weeks has made him arrogant. Lee Jun catches his breath, knowing it's anything but easy as Bak Ok presses forward with terrifying velocity, clearly operating at a far higher tier of external power than before. Lee Jun recoils as Bak Ok frames his hands into a specific stance, the Tiger Dragon Mountain Sunderer fists, charging with the force of a low-altitude gale. Bak Ok hammers down a heavy strike. Lee Jun attempts to absorb the impact through his sword guard, but the sheer kinetic force shatters his stance, blowing him backward. He hits the dirt, spitting blood. Bak Ok stands over him, shouting at him to get up, sneering that scoring a minor fluke in a past practice session didn't change reality. He will always remain a natural-born loser at the bottom of the food chain. Lee Jun looks at the blood on his hands, past trauma weighing on his chest, but shaking his head, he resolves that things are different now. Grabbing his hilt, he recenters his chi, whispering that he is no longer the helpless victim from before. Bak Ok roars that he'll gladly beat the lesson back into him, and both combatants collide in a spectacular clash. As Bak Ok drives a straight punch, Lee Jun counters with a precise, high-pressure palm strike that completely shatters the reinforced bracer on Bak Ok's forearm. Bak Ok recoils in absolute disbelief as his armor splinters apart. Fueled by a sudden surge of adrenaline and a deep desire to break his oppressor, Lee Jun presses the offensive, executing a brilliant flowing sequence that cleanly splinters the rest of Bak Ok's shoulder guard, drawing gasps from the spectators. Realizing victory is within his grasp, Lee Jun drives forward with total commitment. Bak Ok finds himself entirely unable to track the kid's movements. Preparing for a decisive fight-ending palm strike directly toward the collarbone to seal the win, Lee Jun suddenly senses a violent, irregular spasm across his meridian lines, causing his vision to blur and his footing to give out at the exact worst moment. Capitalizing on the sudden opening, Bak Ok connects with a desperate, heavy counterpunch that knocks him out cold. When Lee Jun finally opens his eyes in the infirmary, his body is trembling with phantom pain. Looking up, he sees our protagonist standing over him, who calmly remarks that he lost by a hair's breadth. The boy hangs his head in deep shame, apologizing to his instructor and lamenting his failure. Our protagonist dismisses it, stating that a single loss is fine and noting they still have Woojeong to close out the set. However, his expression turns dead serious, releasing a suffocating aura as he looks down at Lee Jun, asking why he failed to follow his explicit cultivation guidelines. The boy trembles, wondering how he could possibly tell. Our protagonist scoffs, stating it's glaringly obvious from his remaining reserves. Had he diligently executed the deep cleansing meridian circulation exercises assigned to him, his internal energy pool wouldn't have bottomed out during that final stretch. Lee Jun looks down, realizing his shortcut caught up to him, acknowledging that a proper foundation would have yielded a completely different result. He fears he has completely lost his teacher's favor as our protagonist turns his back to walk away. But stopping at the door, the instructor sighs, noting it isn't entirely the boy's fault, admitting that as an instructor, he himself failed to sufficiently secure his students' absolute trust. Leaving the boy staring at the ceiling in deep reflection, he remembers the constant reminders to stop complaining and focus strictly on his energy pathways. It truly was his only path to real progression. He realizes his own skepticism was his undoing. Outside the barracks, however, our protagonist's expression relaxes into a knowing smirk. Everything went exactly according to plan. Just as Su Yang had previously analyzed, a standard victory wasn't the goal here. Bak Ok is a purely aggressive close-quarters slugger. For someone with Lee Jun's specific meridian structural flaws, attempting to maintain a prolonged evasion strategy while slowly building up a charge is mathematically inefficient. Had that unrefined final palm strike connected, it might have caused permanent meridian feedback. This failure serves his long-term pedagogical goals far better. Now, Lee Jun will completely abandon his stubborn doubts and follow his guidance without question. Lost in thought, a voice breaks his concentration, asking why he's wearing such a creepy smile. It's old Jin Baek. Our protagonist greets him, asking what brings the head physician out of his medical pavilion. Jinbaek retorts that since the final deciding match is about to begin, the special classes instructor should actually be at the ring supporting his student. Our protagonist scoffs, asking if he means that arrogant brat, Wu Zhang. Jinbaek chides him, noting a teacher shouldn't speak so critically of his own pupil, especially since entering the boy into the celestial martial tournament wasn't even the kid's choice. Our protagonist leans in, whispering a secret. The actual administrative results of these duels don't matter to him in the slightest. Jinbaek stares at him, entirely bewildered, unable to fathom his detached mindset, to fully comprehend the dramatic final clash. We rewind 8 minutes prior to the center ring. The tournament stands at a razor-thin tie, with both factions holding exactly 2 victories and 2 losses apiece, meaning the final match will decide the entire selection. Stepping onto the platform, Baek Jong looks at his opponent with immense disdain. It has been over a decade since the Lotus Sword Hall formally broke away from the main branch of the destructive sword style. Throughout those years, his hall's practitioners consistently entered premier tournaments, securing a stellar reputation across the continent. By executing countless criminal elements from the unorthodox factions, they bolstered the standing of the Orthodox alliance. Yet he fumes, traditionalists still blindly boast that the legacy destructive sword style remains peerless under heaven, despite the main clan achieving absolutely nothing of note since the conclusion of the Great Demonic War, viewing them as a toothless, fading tiger. He views this entire trial as a farce brought about by the administration's weakness, vowing to thoroughly crush this arrogant brat and conclude the debate once and for all, intending to visually demonstrate to the entire academy that the legacy style has long been surpassed by the Lotus Sword Hall's refinement. Baek Jong unleashes a massive wave of sharp sword chi, drawing murmurs of awe from the audience. Sung Yoon watches intently, knowing Baek Jong is his final line of defense, a single senior cadet capable of neutralizing Wu Zhang. Baek Jong unleashes a devastating opening strike, but Wu Zhang remains completely motionless until the absolute final millisecond, deflecting the trajectory with a minimal flick. It was a feint. Baek Jong instantly blurs behind him for a blind spot puncture, but Wu Zhang's operational speed is astonishing, resetting his guard to instantly catch the blow. The two engage in a blinding exchange of high-level blade work, their velocity and precision drawing gasps from the audience, who find it hard to believe these are mere academy students. Baek Jong launches into a soaring aerial maneuver, attempting to drive a heavy downward vertical split straight through his opponent. Wu Zhang glides backward to let the strike hit empty air. Baek Jong sneers, asking if he forgot that no one in this institution understands the core mechanics of the Heavenly Dragon Court's supreme sword better than him. Wu Zhang calmly agrees, admitting that under his old parameters, he definitely would have struggled against that specific sequence, but notes he has updated his methodology. He drops into an unorthodox asymmetrical guard. Baek Jong frowns, demanding to know what kind of broken stance that is, and asking if he honestly thinks a makeshift style can counter a perfected art. But as Baek Jong initiates his next lunge, an overwhelming wave of killing intent crashes over his mind, making him vividly visualize his own head flying off his shoulders. He freezes in absolute horror, paralyzed by the raw psychological pressure. By the time he snaps out of it, Wu Zhang's training blade is resting gently against his throat. Wu Zhang tells him to stay focused, noting he still has several variables he wishes to test out. Insulted, Baek Jong swings wildly, but Wu Zhang smoothly flows backward and re-engages. Baek Jong grows frantic, completely unable to comprehend how a standard style can be modified to behave this way, realizing Wu Zhang is actively rewriting his sword techniques mid-combat. Our protagonist watches with a cold smile, recognizing the core structural adjustments. The boy is actively stripping away the traditional flourishes from the Heavenly Dragon Court's supreme sword ever since his brief exchange with Li Jun, where the instructor casually remarked that no standard kata is absolute. A brilliant tactical mind like Wu Zhang's immediately seized upon the underlying truth. There is no such thing as a perfect, flawless style, and no heritage technique is genuinely invincible. Therefore, utilizing his peerless innate talent, the only sword style that will ever fit him perfectly is one he alters himself to match his unique physical dimensions. Of course, the original untouched legacy style was celebrated as the pinnacle of orthodox swordsmanship, and compared to that historical standard, Wu Zhang's customized variation is still highly unrefined and full of technical gaps. Right now, Baek Jong is simply failing to exploit those gaps due to sheer cognitive shock. Our protagonist knows that once the boy refines these adjustments, his self-authored style will vastly eclipse the original legacy. Baekjong roars in pure indignation, screaming that the heir to a legendary noble house has gone completely mad, desecrating and rewriting ancestral techniques passed down through generations, and doing so openly in front of the entire academy roster. He curses him as a thoroughly conceited brat, asking if he has no fear of his clan's absolute fury as he drives forward with a desperate strike. Wu Zhong effortlessly parries, calmly noting that his family's internal politics are hardly the concern of an outsider. Baekjong yells and commits to a final heavy overhand smash, but with a precise high-frequency counterflick. Wu Zhong cleanly snaps Baekjong's training blade in two, leaving him frozen in shock. Wu Zhong lowers his weapon, stating he will handle his own consequences and politely requesting that others stop meddling in his development. The referee formally signals the conclusion. The match goes to Wu Zhong of the special class. This locks the overall score at 3-2, securing the definitive team victory for the challengers. Leaving the administrative pavilion in stunned silence while the special class students cheer wildly at the impossible upset. Our protagonist watches them celebrate, content to let them enjoy this fleeting moment of triumph, knowing that given the dark clouds on the horizon, this memory might be the happiest piece they experience for a long time. The Master of Ceremonies steps to the center, calling for Instructor Sabagan to step forward as the official representative of the winning special purpose class. Our protagonist calmly walks up to the central dais, where Pilji greets him warmly, publicly commending him for the extraordinary achievement, noting that very few individuals in attendance truly believed his roster could pull off such an upset. He declares that since the results are absolute, as the acting master of the Dragon Spring Academy, he officially confirms that the special purpose class will serve as the sole representative team for the Celestial Martial Tournament. Seung Yoon tries to lodge a formal protest from the stands, but Pilji cuts him off, stating the conditions were set and the matter is finalized. Turning back, he congratulates Sabagan on a flawless outcome. Our protagonist asks if he is dismissed to begin logistical preparations, but Pilji raises a hand, declining with a sharp glint in his eye, suddenly drawing his personal sword and stepping directly into a high guard right in the center of the ring, catching our protagonist completely off guard. Pilji announces that a final duel is required to determine which senior instructor possesses the tactical capability to lead the roster to the Celestial Martial Tournament. The arena erupts into murmurs. The female inspector gasps in disbelief while our protagonist stares at the old master. Realizing the old combat maniac had planned this ambush from the very beginning, Pilji laughs, noting he can see the boredom in his eyes, which only confirms his suspicions. He reveals that a highly intriguing rumor had been circulating the grounds concerning a low-level assistant instructor who supposedly couldn't even regulate his internal chi, who suddenly unlocked an extraordinary providential legacy, instantly achieving the capabilities required to pass the senior instructor evaluation in a mere 48 hours. Pilji notes he initially dismissed it as standard exaggeration, which is exactly why he engineered this entire afternoon to observe him firsthand, stating that standing right before him is the most baffling anomaly he has ever encountered in his long martial career. While his raw muscular density and standard chi signature register as completely ordinary, he can distinctly perceive a bizarre, concentrated foreign energy humming deep within his core. He smiles, stating that the moment he felt it, he made his decision. He absolutely must trade strikes with him. Our protagonist sighs inwardly, having anticipated this exact complication from the shadow divine swordsman, Pilji, the sole peak realm master currently residing at the Dragon Spring Academy, and one of the 10 grandmasters recognized by the Orthodox Alliance, who stepped in as acting headmaster after the mysterious disappearance of the previous director, Sir Jung, 2 years ago. The most exhausting attribute of this elder is his absolute unadulterated obsession with high-level combat. He derives genuine joy only when pushing his limits against formidable targets. Because he traditionally ignores administrative duties to focus entirely on his personal forms, our protagonist hadn't paid him much mind, never expecting the elder's senses to actively register refined mana. Realizing the sensory depth of a peak realm master is truly remarkable, he flatly tells the old man that frankly, he has zero desire to fight him, asking if he can simply opt out. Pilji's expression turns stern, reminding him of his own philosophy. A martial artist's worth is proven solely through his execution. He notes Sabagan is entirely free to walk away, but threatens that if he does, he will personally assume command of the special class for the duration of the tournament, effectively hijacking the students he spent the week refining. Realizing he has been backed into a corner, our protagonist looks toward instructor Bu Jun on the sidelines. Bu Jun looks completely confused by the unfolding situation, But our protagonist locks eyes with him, flashing an unsettling smile as he asks if he remembers the explicit terms of their prior contract. Bu-jun pales as the realization hits him. The loser must unconditionally fulfill any single demand made by the winner. Our protagonist extends his hand, executing an advanced spatial telekinesis maneuver to violently yank the custom Violet Dawn sword clean out of Bu-jun's scabbard across the yard, claiming the weapon as his official winnings. Bu-jun desperately tries to grab the hilt as it flies through the air, clinging onto it for dear life as the blade drags him across the cobblestones. The senior instructors watch in absolute shock, whispering about advanced sword control arts. Bu-jun screams that he will never let him have it, resulting in a comical display as our protagonist rapidly jerks the telekinetic thread to shake the senior instructor off his prize. Our protagonist sighs, muttering that facing a peak realm master without a decent focal catalyst would be needlessly tedious. He looks toward the acting headmaster, Pil-ji, who simply glares at the clinging Bu-jun, ordering him to release the weapon immediately before he boots him off the platform himself. Bu-jun is forced to let go, crashing into the dirt as the Violet Dawn sword snaps cleanly into our protagonist's grip. Examining the edge, he notes it's an exceptionally fine piece of metallurgy, promising to put it to excellent use. Bu-jun trembles on the ground, weeping tears of pure rage and swearing eternal vengeance against Sabigan. With a proper weapon secured, Pil-ji motions for him to take his stance, but our protagonist tells him to wait a moment. He notes he has a lingering question. Why employ such an elaborate public administrative pretext just to trigger a sparring match? If a peak realm master simply wanted to test a junior colleague, there were far less disruptive ways to arrange it. Pointing out that from an objective standpoint, the acting director stands to lose massive institutional face if this backfires. He asks if Pil-ji truly believes there is absolute zero chance of an upset. Pil-ji chuckles, stating that while he isn't entirely humble, he isn't blinded by arrogance either, revealing he had two excellent reasons for this approach. First, had he merely issued a private challenge, the young instructor likely would have given a half-hearted effort and thrown the match to avoid trouble, since there were no stakes. Second, he considers this public commitment his personal demonstration of professional sincerity, acknowledging that the young man's ultimate objective was always control over the tournament roster, admitting he doesn't care about his underlying motives, but recognized the tournament was a non-negotiable goal for him. He asks if Sabigan understands, now stating that by risking his own administrative standing, he expects an absolute, uninhibited display of his true capabilities in return. Our protagonist sighs, realizing he has been cornered by a remarkably stubborn individual. He adjusts his grip, noting that a full power clash might actually prove fatal, which is precisely what the old adrenaline junkie wants. Accepting the terms, our protagonist initiates the duel by unleashing a dense wave of ethereal phantom sword chi. Pil-ji's eyes light up as he fluidly raises his blade to parry, commending the physical density of the energy wave but noting that basic projection won't be enough to breach his guard. Instantly, the ground beneath Pil-ji's boots flashes with white frost, locking his lower joints in a localized layer of elemental ice magic. The surrounding instructors stare in absolute shock, questioning if this is even martial arts anymore as a massive high-temperature fireball manifests in the air, roaring down toward the Grandmaster. Our protagonist had strongly preferred to conceal his magical capabilities within this era, but facing the most formidable peak realm combatant since his time regression means holding back is no longer an option. Recognizing the terrifying density of the descending spell, Pil-ji prepares his absolute defense as the explosive elemental arc completely engulfs his position. Without pausing, our protagonist manifests a pure mana blade across his steel core, determined to conclude the high-risk engagement as swiftly as possible. He blitzes through the billowing smoke screen, driving a high-velocity piercing strike. As the dust clears, Pil-ji's blade is seen holding the line, locked directly against the glowing energy edge, an ecstatic smile plastered across the old man's face, laughing that his instincts were entirely correct. He declares that the real dance begins now, eager to savor every millisecond of the exchange. Executing a blinding shadow step, Pil-ji dissolves into an illusionary afterimage, instantly reforming behind our protagonist's blind spot. Our protagonist reads the displacement perfectly, spinning to lock blades in a flawless guard, leaving the Grandmaster internally startled by his impossible reaction speed. Since this is just the beginning, his opponent is incredibly strong and manages to blow our protagonist back. He activates an overload spell, a strength enhancement, a concentration boost, a reaction speed buff, and a durability enhancer, all while keeping him at close range. Sabigan manages to defend himself against the director's relentless onslaught. Truth be told, both of them are incredible fighters. To the director, this is exhilarating. He has been waiting for a fight like this for a very long time and wants to savor it a bit more. Meanwhile, Our protagonist knows that even if he deploys every power-up spell in his arsenal, a head-on collision is simply too risky. He immediately summons astral chains and manages to bind him. He hadn't wanted to reveal this ability with so many onlookers watching, but it reminds him of the last time he used it. Right now, it doesn't matter how great of a martial artist his opponent is. If your internal energy is drained, you're completely helpless. But just as he traps him, the director shocks our protagonist by slicing right through the chains with his sword. Having slipped away to the side, he lunges forward. Sabagan tries to throw up a barrier, but it shatters instantly upon impact, sending our protagonist flying backward. Everyone is filled with anxiety, especially Su Yang. From the very start, this was a duel he never should have accepted. His opponent is a peak martial artist ranked in the top 10 of the Orthodox Alliance, notorious for being a combat fanatic. Even if Sabagan possesses bizarre techniques, there are still limits to what he can do. What on earth was he thinking? Though he is brought down to his knees on the ground, Pilji looks up and scoffs, noting that he can see right through Instructor Sabagan's various parlor tricks. He taunts that if this pathetic display is truly all he has to offer, he is sorely disappointed. However, Sabagan fires back, muttering that old habits truly die hard. As if being demoted for being a battle-obsessed junkie wasn't enough, he went and picked a fight without knowing his place, only to get torn to shreds for it. Onlookers can't believe the lunatic instructor is actually trash-talking. He must have a death wish. After all, Pilji is known as the legendary Shadow Divine Swordsman. Just as Sabagan mentioned, a mere 5 years ago, that man was the commander of the Orthodox Alliance's Vanguard unit. Even back then, his martial arts mastery was awe-inspiring. The real issue was his feral nature. He would charge in without a second thought the moment he found a martial artist worth dueling. Because of his reckless nature, he caused endless trouble throughout the Alliance, eventually getting demoted to a regular instructor at the Dragonspring Academy. Back then, Sir Jung, one of the 10 Grand Masters of the Orthodox Alliance, was serving as the Academy's director. Pilji challenged Sir Jung to a duel and suffered a humiliating defeat. Fortunately, that defeat kept him in check for a while. The problem is that after director Sir Jung mysteriously vanished 2 years ago, there was no one left at the academy capable of keeping his bloodlust under control, a fact that every veteran instructor knows all too well. But that past defeat is the one thing you must never bring up to his face. Enraged, Pilji growls, asking if pathetic provocations are all he has left. He grants him credit for having guts but warns that if it's all empty talk, he will pay the price. He snaps, calling Sabagan a brat. Our protagonist retorts, asking if he's talking to him, thoroughly annoyed by the disrespect. Putting on airs just because he's a petty peak real master, Pilji demanded to see what he's truly made of. Fine. If that's what he wants, Sabagan will gladly show him. He warns the old man not to blame him if he ends up dead, since he brought this entirely on himself. In the Jianghu, martial artists rely on internal energy. However, the power used by beings of the demon realm, the absolute source of demonic might, is mana. Aside from being an intangible energy with no physical form, its core nature and origin are entirely separate from internal energy. When the two coexist, they refuse to mix and instead repel each other with violent force. And Sabagan is the sole existence who harbors both massive internal energy and mana within a single body. Ironically, this was possible because of his flawed innate constitution, which originally prevented him from channeling internal energy properly. So, here is the ultimate question. If you take the dormant internal energy resting inside you, ignite your life force with mana to activate that hidden power, and then forcibly fuse them while amplifying the mana to its absolute crushing limit, what happens? What would the result be? This isn't like Harrion, who works with an incredibly minuscule amount and blends them slowly over time. If you force two violently opposing forces, both amplified to their absolute maximums, to collide head-on, the resulting explosion is catastrophic. This exact technique explains how someone like Sabagan, who originally couldn't even match a basic first-class martial artist in the Murim, would rise to become a commander of the demon army. Channeling this ultimate mana fusion, he challenges Pilji to try and withstand it. Seeing the overwhelming volatile aura erupting from Sabagan, the old instructor realizes this is a monstrously destructive force. Everyone in the audience panics and begins backing away in sheer disbelief. The heaven-sent power he claimed to have is the real deal. As the crazed instructor lunges at him, Sabagan throws caution to the wind, manifesting countless mana circles. Unleashing his ultimate fusion attack, he invokes the first technique, Blade of the Sun. For a split second, A deceptive stillness hangs in the air, but the strike completely shears through Pilji's sword, followed by a cataclysmic explosion behind him. Onlookers shield their eyes as the devastating slash completely obliterates everything in its path. Sabagan stands thoroughly exhausted, recognizing that the technique wasn't perfect because he ran short on mana. His current body couldn't fully handle the wild surge of energy, and above all, his weapon shattered under the pressure. The sword he used was clearly subpar. Regardless, it got the job done without killing him, and the duel is over. Infuriated, the instructor hurls his broken hilt aside. It seems both fighters have lost their weapons. If there's still a score to settle, we can always finish this with our fists, Sabagan tells him. But the old master's expression suddenly turns dead serious. He notes that rumors claim Sabagan was born incapable of utilizing internal energy, and that he only recently gained the ability through some miraculous fate. He confirms it's true, but then he asks if that terrifying sword Chi unleashed a moment ago was also a technique of his own creation. When Sabagan nods in confirmation, Pilji drops the remains of his weapon entirely. He raises his voice so everyone present can hear him clear across the courtyard. As the acting master of the Dragon Spring Academy and head sword instructor, Pilji loudly announces that since this duel was meant to determine who would lead their team into the Grand Marshal tournament, he officially declares Instructor Sabagan the victor. The entire crowd gasps in shock. He tasks Sabagan with securing a stellar victory at the Grand Marshal tournament to bring honor to the Dragon Spring Academy. With his piece said, the crowd erupts into murmurs. They can't fathom how a supposedly mediocre assistant instructor could achieve this. Even our protagonist is left bewildered by the sudden concession. Without waiting for a response, the old master turns on his heel and leaves, yet his mind keeps racing as he reflects on Sabagan's confirmation that he created that sword Chi. Recalling the sheer immense power packed into that single strike, he realizes that if the sword hadn't shattered, this entire area would have been reduced to scorched earth, leaving absolutely no survivors, not even himself. That sword Chi wasn't designed to fight humans at all. It was an incomprehensible vast power that transcends mortal understanding. It was a blade forged to strike down an entity of a completely different scale. To think he developed such an absurdly powerful technique entirely on his own. What on earth is Sabagan preparing to face? Meanwhile, deep in the night, a hidden scout senses a foreign mana fluctuation, detecting a unique, unidentifiable signature from this anomalous event. They prepare to report the situation back to the demon army. Moving like a mindless specter through the shadows, the scout slips away to deliver the intel. The scene shifts to the Academy's medical pavilion, where Jinbak berates our protagonist, telling the reckless brat that there are limits to how much he should push his body. Sabagan sighs, arguing it was unavoidable, but the doctor retorts, asking if he thinks this is just like some unorthodox martial arts that recoil and harm the user due to pure destructive output. He emphasizes that this is on an entirely different level. In all his years of medicine, he has never seen an art so inherently self-destructive. What kind of monster technique was that? Sabagan requests that the pavilion master drop the subject so he won't have to lie to him. Understanding the boundary, Jinbak falls silent and agrees. Having patched him up, he reminds Sabagan that he will soon be busy leading the team for the Grand Marshal tournament. But for now, he must rest and recover. Sabagan quietly agrees. At least he managed to survive without breaking his body completely. Now he has other matters to attend to. Just then, a voice calls out from the doorway. It's the deputy director Sung Yoon, asking if he can come in. Having come all the way to the infirmary personally, he is exactly the type of scheming man to pull a stunt like this, especially since he just confirmed with his own eyes the terrifying martial prowess he had previously only suspected. Stepping into the room, he wears a false smile. Sabagan chuckles dryly, remarking that life is full of surprises. Who would have thought the deputy director would visit him personally? He asks what business brings him here, keeping his guard up. Seung Yoon offers his superficial congratulations on winning the duel, but immediately pivots, mentioning that an unfortunate administrative issue has arisen regarding the tournament roster. Irritated, Sabagan demands to know what he's planning now, warning that he'll crush him if he gets in his way. The deputy director quickly clarifies that the team is missing one crucial cadet. He explains that the official regulations require a minimum roster of 6 participants before entering the grand tournament, though most factions bring around 10, including reserves. Since Sabagan's specialized class only contains 5 students, they fall short. Sung Yoon thinks he has him cornered, but to our protagonist, solving this requirement is simple. If he needs to fill the final slot, there is one obvious candidate for the job. A week later, the group prepares to depart. Muntan and Harrian talk among themselves, barely able to believe they are actually heading out to the event, assuming they survive the journey, of course. They mention it takes a full month of travel just to reach the Martial Academy grounds. They've even heard rumors that successfully navigating the journey outside their own sect territory is considered part of the test itself, wondering what kind of crazy setup this tournament has. Waiting up ahead for them is Wuzhong. Seeing him, Li Jun tenses up nervously, while Soso watches on, entirely unfazed by the prodigy's presence. As they wonder when their leader will arrive, Sabigan steps out to meet them. The students eagerly crowd around, deeply grateful to their incredible instructor for earning them a spot at the prestigious Grand Martial Tournament. Sabigan smirks, knowing half of them are just terrified of the training, but pauses to make an important announcement before they depart. He introduces the final member joining their journey, taking everyone by surprise. Danhwa from the elite Flying Dragon class has been added to fill the mandatory roster quota. The boys whisper amongst themselves, remembering how Sabigan utterly dominated her in their previous match. As Danhwa steps forward, she glances toward them, slightly blushing and keeping quiet. The Alliance Inspector, Su Yang, joins the caravan as well. Declaring she can't let this eccentric instructor run wild with the students, she vows to keep a close eye on the group, privately. She reminds Sabigan that she expects him to keep his promise to aid her vengeance as long as she stays by his side, warning him that if he double-crosses her, she'll eliminate him. She promises to make him pay dearly if he lied. With that, the grand caravan sets off on an indefinite journey. Despite their bickering and constant banter, a genuine bond has formed among the students. It is officially the start of a massive new adventure, even if the phrase itself sounds a bit like a classic bad omen. Though a sudden wave of restlessness washes over them, they steady their pace and march onward, leaving the familiar academy gates far behind. And that brings an end to the epic first season of The Return of the Hellmaster.